Is being recorded. Therefore, please speak clearly and state your name and address for the record. With that said, let's proceed with the first item.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first item is for 2704 Hackberry Street. This is in the Kleinview Hackberry Historic District. It is one of the smaller historic districts in the city. So the subject property is situated on the east side of Hackberry Street at the intersection with Clayton Street in the East Walnut Hills neighborhood. The existing 2.5-story, 2-bay, 4-square type brick dwelling has a full-width covered front porch and a front gabled roof. The house was built circa 1915, according to the auditor's website. The eaves and gutters, along with the gabled ends beneath the eaves, are painted white or are white vinyl in contrast to the color of the brick. The wooden porch spindles are also painted white. A driveway runs along the south side of the house, and the property is bounded by other dwellings on either side, and there are dwellings both behind it and across the street. Per the historic conservation guidelines, the house at 2704 Hackberry is considered part of the third phase of development of this district, which spans the time period from 1865 to 1920. This house, dating from circa 1915, is a American four-square, and other examples of this style can also be seen at 2710 Hackberry and 1649 Clayton. So the proposed work is to paint the brick building. As you can see here, it was previously unpainted. The city does not regulate paint colors, but does regulate painting of painted versus unpainted brick in some of the city's historic districts. This building has been painted Sherwin-Williams software blue color, which is complementary to the darker color of the brick. There are other buildings in the historic district that are also painted a very similar blue color. So for the certificate of appropriateness review, the guidelines for Kleinview Hackberry state if it was painted, paint it again. The guidelines do not specifically state unpainted brick should remain unpainted. So based on that, staff feels that the painting of a previously unpainted building, it does need to be approved by the Historic Conservation Board, but we would be in favor of the painting here, again, because there is nothing in the guidelines that specifically states unpainted brick should remain unpainted. So we feel that the color is appropriate. Again, there are other buildings in the historic district that are painted a very similar color. I did review other historic color palettes, and this color certainly would fit in with a time period of the 19-teens, 1920s. So with that, staff recommends the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on the application from Beth Sullenberger, applicant dated 10/4/24 for the certificate of appropriateness. Staff recommends approval of a certificate of appropriateness for 2704 Hackberry Street, including any revisions submitted for permit, subject to staff review and approval with the following conditions. There are no conditions, but the staff feels that the board should make this determination per section 1435-09-2. That the property owner has demonstrated by credible evidence that the proposal substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines, and that the painting of the building does not detract from the neighborhood and is an appropriate color for the time period of the house. Painting the brick exterior does not substantially detract from the character of the original building or surrounding district. And again, the historic guidelines state if it was painted, paint it again, and do not state anything specific about unpainted brick buildings.
Thank you, Ms.
So staff recommends for approval.
Thank you. It looks like we do have an applicant. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you. I'm Beth Sullenberger. I am a historic preservation consultant based at 960 Laurel Avenue in Glendale. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a veteran of the Historic Conservation Office, where I spent 5 years and served on the Historic Conservation Board for 11 years. And I'm here on behalf of the owner, Eitan Ben Baruch, and I really don't have anything to add to the staff report, which did an excellent job of explaining the situation, and I hope you will approve the application.
Thank you. Mr. Baruch, would you like to add anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for the applicant or staff by the board? I don't have any members of the public signed up, so if there are no questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Second.
Call the roll. Mr. Zelasco?
Aye.
Mr. Centerman?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
The chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you. Item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the second item is for some rehabilitation work and a new addition to a building at 414 Central Avenue, which is in the downtown development and West 4th Street Historic District. And the subject property is situated at the southeast corner of Central Avenue and Perry Street in downtown, and is a 3-story circa 1875 Italianate style painted brick building with a vacant lot to the north. There was previously a 1-story circa 1900s non-contributing altered addition to the existing building that wrapped around part of the front of this building. It was demolished in 2021 per city permit history. The first floor storefront is boarded over and was previously altered when the non-historic addition was added to the front. I'm sure many people are familiar with this building. It last served as Campanello's Italian restaurant, and there was storage room above. On this particular building, the original windows have been replaced with aluminum 1/1 double hung windows, but original hood molds above windows remain on the 2nd and 3rd floors. The original cornice is intact, so it is assumed the building historically had a box gutter, and this has been removed and replaced with a modern round gutter at an unknown time. The building is bordered by Central Avenue to the west, Perry Street to the north. The new addition will be at the corner of Central and Perry. The area is made up of multi-story unpainted and painted brick buildings that are mixed use or residential in nature. So the applicant proposes to rehabilitate the first floor of the existing historic building, returning it to a more traditional storefront appearance, with a paneled knee wall, large single pane windows, and transoms above. In addition, the applicant proposes to build a 3-story addition to this building on the vacant lot. The new building is proposed to be of red brick construction with a visible concrete foundation with rusticated joints. It will also have a cornice at the top of the building, similar to that found on the existing building. The addition will be of the same height and will have a flat roof. The first floor will feature single pane windows with a glass transom above, emulating more of a traditional storefront look. The upper stories will have 1/1 double hung windows to match those on the historic building, with simple lintels above and sills below. And you can see here the images of the proposed addition and storefront. And staff recommends that the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans by architect Vincent Terry, applicant, dated 7/14/24 and 10/29/24. For the certificate of appropriateness, staff recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for 414 Central Avenue, including any revisions submitted for permit, subject to staff review and approval with the following conditions. That all new window glass should be clear and not have any visible tint, and that building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date, or the certificate of appropriateness shall expire. And for the finding, the board makes this determination per section 1435-09-2, that the property owner has demonstrated by credible evidence that the proposal substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines, and that the proposed addition to the historic building will be highly visible from 2 streets and fits in with the character of the district. The addition meets the historic conservation guidelines for the West 4th Street Historic District. It also meets those requirements that it has a base, middle, and top. It will be a compatible new building to the existing historic buildings within this block of Central Avenue. And it will be complementary to the historic building, but will read as new. And so staff recommends for approval of the storefront alterations and addition.
Thank you, Ms. Meehan. Mr. Terry, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not. I think she did a very good job explaining the project. I appreciate you.
Are there any questions or comments for the applicant or staff? I do not have anyone else signed up for this item, so if there are no questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Mr. Zalasko?
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Young? Aye. The chair votes aye. Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Okay, item number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 3 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness and zoning relief for the property at 223 West 4th Street, within the West 4th Street Historic District. The building is currently vacant and has been for many years, and the applicant is proposing a renovation of the building into a new affordable housing development. And they are also pursuing historic tax credits through the National Park Service for the rehabilitation. So you can see on the screen, these are images of the property as it is currently. As I said, it's been vacant for many years. The first floor storefront is boarded up, and beneath these boards, there is a large recess where the historic storefront was formerly removed from the building to create a setback entry. So most of the original storefront is gone with the exception of some of the remaining metal columns. On the rear of the building, this storefront has been infilled with concrete block. It was a 2-story storefront. Most of it is concrete block infill. There is one overhead garage door in the central bay. And then you can see on the side elevation, several of the windows are boarded up on the side as well. So you can see in the current condition, the line that is set back from the edge of the building. This is where a replacement storefront was rebuilt at some point in the past. So this area in the front of that is all open to the street. So the applicant is proposing to replace that storefront with a storefront that will be flush with the front of the building. The majority of the work on the exterior is repair work. The existing double hung windows will be retained, as most of them are not badly deteriorated, so they will be repaired and retained. The historic prism glass remains for the most part in the upper transom along the storefront, so that will be repaired and retained. And then the storefront itself will be replaced, as I mentioned, along with the same plane on the front of the building. The staff feels that the storefront treatment is appropriate and has a historic configuration with the knee wall and then vertical separations within the storefront area. On the rear, that storefront will also be reopened in its original configuration or close to it. And then on the side elevations with the bricked in windows, these will be reopened for the most part. The former window openings that were enlarged door openings for the fire escape will be restored to window openings, and that fire escape will be removed. So staff feels that from a certificate of appropriateness standpoint, this is all following the guidelines for the West 4th Historic District, and staff would recommend approval on these items. Regarding the zoning relief, this is in a commercial continuity overlay within the downtown area, which essentially requires at least 60% of the ground floor frontage to be a commercial use. That's along West 4th Street. So the applicant is requesting a special exception to remove that requirement, as the entire building is proposed to be residential. There will be an entry vestibule for the residential units on the right side of that storefront, while the left side will be occupied by a staff office. So the staff office is considered to be an accessory residential use, as it is only intended for residents of this building or potentially future residents for leasing purposes. So it is not considered to be a commercial use, and it does not meet the commercial continuity requirement. So staff generally is okay with this arrangement. In this area of 4th Street, we'd really prefer to see commercial use where possible along this area, because 4th Street is a relatively intact commercial corridor downtown, one of the few that remain. And staff is somewhat reluctant to allow relief to eliminate that commercial continuity requirement. However, in this particular circumstance, this section of 4th Street does not have a lot of retail uses along it. There are parking garages and vacant surface lots and things along those lines in this area. So staff does not feel that the lack of a commercial space in this specific building would be as detrimental to the larger 4th Street corridor as a whole as it would if it were further west on the street. And then furthermore, by having a staff office along that 4th Street frontage, it will have some minimal level of activity at least, and will still activate the street to some extent. So considering the configuration of the building with the very narrow building and part of that being taken up by that necessary entry vestibule for the apartments, this would be a relatively small commercial space that could be installed in this building. So staff feels that generally is appropriate, as it may be difficult to lease tenant space in such a narrow configuration. So with all that said, staff recommends the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans. Sorry, I have City Studios. This is actually New Republic architecture dated October 4th, 2024. My mistake there. But staff does recommend approval of the special exception for no ground floor commercial space below the minimum 60% required. And staff also recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for the property with the conditions that 1, any changes required by the National Park Service for the federal historic tax credit application shall be approvable by staff. And 2, the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date, or the COA shall expire.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Looks like we have an applicant. If you could identify yourself and add anything.
Hello, my name is James Bayless. I'm an architect with New Republic Architecture. Thank you, Mr. Owen. I'm here to answer any questions and to address the building is about 30 feet wide, and the office would be either a leasing space or would offer counseling to residents within them.
Great, thank you. I do also have one person signed up for this.
Maurice Hanover, or?
Yes, I just represent the owner. I'm here with James. Great, nothing else to add.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board for either the applicant or staff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm curious, what's the status of the application for the tax credits?
The project has previously been approved in a different form. The internal configuration has changed, so we've submitted an amendment and are waiting, responding to hold comments.
For state and federal?
For state.
For state. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Do not have anyone else signed up, so I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve both the zoning relief and the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Second.
Roll, Mr. Zalesko.
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Chair votes aye. Thank you. Good luck. We are now to item number 4. I would have too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 4 is an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 2 Beechcrest Lane. This property is located in the East Walnut Hills Historic District. And the applicant is proposing a 3-car, 2-story garage addition on the side of the house that will be towards the north part of the property. There is no zoning relief related to this proposal, as the recent changes to the zoning code do not require the base setbacks for the underlying district to be met when it's located in a historic district, letting the conservation guidelines take precedence. So there is no zoning relief required. This is just a certificate of appropriateness application. So the proposed addition is going to be on the north side of the property. As I mentioned, it will be located in front of the existing 2-car detached garage, which is currently a 1.5-story garage that is attached to the house with a stone wall that connects it. And the proposed addition will be placed in front of that garage structure. As indicated on the plans, it will be slightly lower than the secondary wing of the house, and it will be generally in the same plane as the front of the primary block of the building. So from a certificate of appropriateness standpoint, staff does have concerns with the proposed placement and massing of the structure. As you can see on the site plan, the garage structure is going to be quite large, and it will be in a prominent place on the lot that is primarily in the same plane as the existing main block of the house. The applicants did make some modifications to this based on staff feedback. It was a slightly larger structure that came out further in front of the house on the lot. So the applicants did push the addition back so that it's in the same plane as the main house. They also narrowed it by about 4 feet and reduced the height by a couple feet as well to make it somewhat more subordinate to the principal structure on the house, but staff still does have the same concerns in general on the project. So the East Walnut Hills Historic District, especially the Beechcrest Lane portion of the district, is defined by large buildings that are set towards the rear of the lot with large grassy front yard areas and open views going down the street. There are many accessory garage structures in this district, but generally speaking, almost all of them are located in a similar orientation as the existing garage on this property that is built in the rear and in most cases in the corner of the lot. So you can see on the surrounding properties, there are similar conditions with accessory structures that are placed at the rear corner of the lot line. So staff's primary concern with this garage is the siding and the massing. As I mentioned, staff is concerned that with this placement being in the same plane as the main building and being 2 stories in height, it does have the potential to overshadow the existing building. Staff had spoken with the applicant about other possible options for placing this garage in a more suitable location. Staff's preference would have been to keep the original detached garage in its same location and then build an addition to the south of that garage that could create additional parking for a third vehicle. this could even be extended forward because the existing garage is approximately 19 feet deep. It is a fairly small garage for modern vehicles. So one of the applicant's desires with this new garage structure was to have additional space so that they could park a large SUV within the garage. So staff felt that there was still opportunity for that with an addition on the south of this garage by bumping that out closer to the street at that area, but still being well behind the principal structure of this house. That would require the reworking of the addition. Obviously, likely it would require the loss of the proposed keeping room and the second laundry room that are proposed as part of this addition, as well as potentially some of the second floor living space. However, staff feels that it could accomplish the main goal of providing the third spot for the larger vehicle. There were concerns about this situation because it would take up a lot of the space for the outdoor terrace area that is proposed in the rear yard. However, there is additional space in that rear yard where that terrace could be further extended to the south to make up for that lost space. Short of that option, staff also inquired about a separate detached structure that would be in the south corner of this building, again, away from the street, where it would not be as prominent on the site. There were concerns about that location primarily due to access to the original house, which granted would not be as convenient because it would be in the rear yard. There's not an easily accessible door aside from coming up into the sunroom or playroom wing of the building and then going through the entire house. So staff understands those concerns about convenience. However, in the interest of historic preservation, staff feels that that would be a sacrifice that could be made for a more appropriate design. Otherwise, from the standpoint of the guidelines, staff does feel that in general, the materials and the design of the structure are in keeping with the design guidelines. They are, the materials are similar to what was used on the primary house. There will be a stucco finish. It will not have the stone base that's found on the main building, which will help to differentiate the new construction from the historic. And it carries on the false thatched roofing material on the addition. So from a design standpoint, staff is not as concerned. It feels like it does meet the guidelines on materials and design. However, it's the siding and the massing where staff feels that it really falls short of meeting those guidelines. Beechcrest Lane in general is a neighborhood of large estate type houses that do not have prominent garages on the site. You can see other examples on the street. While many of these do have garages, and many of them have garages that were built recently with approval from the Historic Conservation Board, there are almost no cases where there is an attached garage that is in a prominent, highly visible site on this street. So the one exception to that would be 6 Beechcrest Lane that you can see here, where that is a visible garage that was built in 1991, which was after the historic conservation guidelines were approved. So this was something that was likely approved by a previous historic conservation board, but that is the only example of a highly visible attached garage that is found on this street and generally around the district. There are not many of these as well. So some of the more recent garage structures may have visibility from the street, but they are all, for the most part, detached garages. Most of them are built towards the rear of the property. So when they are front-loaded garages, its impact is minimized by the distance from the street and not overshadowing the main building. So essentially, that is staff's main concern with the project. I would note that we have received both letters of support and letters of opposition to this project. The two letters of opposition were received from property owners on Baker Place, which is the street to the west of the subject property. It is the abutting property owners on the street to the west. So they both have submitted letters of support. We have letters of opposition as well. Two of these letters were received prior to the deadline. We had another letter that was received over the weekend. Those three letters are all from property owners along Beechcrest Avenue or Beechcrest Lane. And they are property owners that are all impacted by the proposed garage. Specifically, the three other property owners on the west side of Beechcrest Lane all have submitted letters of opposition to the project. So with that being said, staff does recommend the Historic Conservation Board take the following actions based on plans submitted with this application. Staff recommends a denial of the certificate of appropriateness for to Beechcrest Lane, with the finding that the property owner has not demonstrated by credible evidence that the proposal substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines, and that prominent front-loaded attached garages are not a common feature of the district, with most garages being detached and sited at the rear property line.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. I understand that we have two parties represented by attorneys today. If the attorney for the applicant would like to come forward for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tim Burke from the Manley Burke Law Firm. I'm here as counsel to both the applicant and the property owners. The property owners are seated to my left, Dr. Juliana Tobler and Dr. William Tobler. Also speaking on behalf of the applicant will be the architect, Steve Ginter. And present, I don't know whether we will use him as a witness, but I believe he is sworn in, is Mike Hindi, who will be the builder on the project. Before I begin to present our witnesses, I would indicate that I would like the opportunity to cross-examine the urban conservator. I understand the position you are likely to take, but I want it in the record. So I'm asking permission to cross-examine the urban conservator.
The rules don't allow for cross-examination.
Unfortunately, we will not be able to allow that. The rules do not allow for that.
You do understand the difficulty that that puts us at. Then he was not sworn in. So how can you take what he has said to be evidence?
I will defer to the board's attorney.
Government officials don't need to be sworn under the rules.
As you know, Mr. Sturkey, in virtually every other municipality and township in the county, they follow the opposite rule.
I believe your argument will be.
Enough said.
Will be preserved for the record.
Appreciate that. Let me call, first of all, Dr. Juliana Tobler, seated to my left. Dr. Tobler, would you identify yourself and your address?
Yes, Juliana Tobler, 2 Beechcrest Lane. Thank you for considering our application. So I just wanted to give a background in our family history moving on to Beechcrest Lane. We moved here in 2017 from Pittsburgh. At the time, it was just the two of us. I was very, very pregnant. And since that time, we have really grown to absolutely love East Walnut Hills. We feel so fortunate to live on this absolutely beautiful street. It's a dream come true. We are very embedded in the neighborhood. We can walk the kids to school. We love the development on Woodburn, O'Brienville. It's idyllic. So as we've grown as a family, so now we have 3 kids that are 7, 5, and 3. our needs have changed. When it was just the two of us, we only had 2 cars. We both work in different hospitals. Our kids were not in school, they were babies, but now they're in school. And so as we thought about how to make this house our forever home, intending to never move and really kind of stay there forever, age in place, we thought about all the different things that we would need to do to make this more functional for us. Currently, our family car, it is large. We got it so that it could accommodate 3 car seats, which we'll be in for some time, which are rather bulky. It does not fit in our garage currently, and so we have our 2 smaller garages kind of crammed into the garage, and we do use it. And so the family car sits on the driveway all of the time, which we also don't prefer from an aesthetic or weather point of view. So as we worked with meeting with contractors, architects through this whole process, our first thing we would say is we'd hand over actually the historic guidelines and say, how can you help us make sure that this is true to the historic board? We're not architects or conservationists. So that was a very important criterion for us to pick our team. We do think that our house and our front yard provides this large park. Like we have a very large front yard with our house pushed all the way back, and we didn't want to remove any more of that green space. Our backyard is pretty narrow, as most of our lot is in front, and our children spend a large amount of time outside, so we really didn't want to restrict the backyard any more than it already is. They have friends that are on Baker Place, and we have gates that go between our yards, and it's just it's kind of a fairy tale type of house, and we love it and would like to make it work for us for the long term.
I have no other questions for Dr. Tobler.
Okay. Please move forward with presenting your case.
My name is Dr. William Tobler. I'm Juliana's husband.
Before you start, let me indicate that we're going to be referring to a number of exhibits. A large part of those will be exhibit number 1 that Dr. Tobler will present. I know that you've got that ready to go, I believe. I also have hard copies of all of the exhibits that we may be referring to, and I'd like to hand those out so that they are available.
I believe that these were all already included in the packet.
I will come to that in just a minute. The last 5 were not included in the packet. One is a photo of something that has just happened since the packet was submitted. The others are documents which I believe we are entitled to submit because they are in rebuttal to evidence that we had not previously seen before and have been filed by Mr. Burley, and I do have a set of the exhibits right here. Sorry, Mr. Burley.
So have you received copies of this information as well?
I just gave them to him.
Great.
This is Mr. Burley. For the record, I have not received these, have not had a time to review them, and would reserve the right to object if needed.
So I do have a presentation. I don't know if you have the first
Mr.
slide.
Burley, if you'd like to go ahead and come up to the table for us, that way we have you on hand. Thank you. Please proceed.
Well, I'd submitted a presentation. I don't know if we can move those slides.
We were told in advance that this would be available.
Is it on Doug's computer?
We just want to,
What I'm looking for is exhibit 1.
It starts with that's the first slide right there. We can use this. I don't know if you can make it a full screen or not, but All right, this is our home, 2 Beechcrest Lane. Since its construction over 100 years ago, it has undergone significant changes altering how the home is used. Previous owners converted servants' quarters into a bedroom, relocated staircases and walls, and transformed all spaces into livable spaces. It was originally designed as a home for widows, now intended to serve a family. However, while some adjustments have been made to accommodate the shift, important modifications remain incomplete that would immensely benefit our life, the flow within our home for now and for the future. This is much more than just building a garage. There's a lot that's gone into the restructuring of the home to make it functional for a family as it's now designed. But to determine this appropriateness for the project, we did research significantly the surrounding properties within East Walnut Hills and made sure to be very familiar with the historic conservation guidelines. It felt like we had enough evidence to move forward with something that we are proposing. You can go to the next slide, please. This is a list of all the garages on Beechcrest Lane. All of them except ours and 5.5 Beechcrest range from 3 to 6 car garages. By square foot, we have the smallest by 2 times, 400 square feet. And even though we are able to currently fit our very 2 compact cars into it, my previous car did not fit into it, and it's very tight and difficult to maneuver. I've actually damaged the framing of the garage and my car trying to get in and out, and there's limited room for storage. As you can see here, most of the square footage is at least 720 square feet and over 1,000 square feet in several circumstances. The only one I can't really speak to is 5.5 Beechcrest Lane, which does sit way down below underneath the street line, which is not visible from the street, and I've never personally been down there to see it. Next slide, please. One thing I want you to notice is that although in our district, garages are typically placed in the back, we have a very visible garage from the front of the street, and is not hidden behind the structure of our home like many other garages are. Next slide. This is a aerial view, kind of hard to see. Might be better on your PowerPoint or your handouts. But there's a couple of things I do want to point out. Number 2, situated between number 1 and 3, is the furthest setback. Those red lines indicate the front of the house. Our proposed structure will be at the top of that blue dot right there. When you come down our street from Madison, which would be at the top of the slide, and you go towards the circle, as you come across the bend, your visual point is actually to the red circle, which is a garage structure at number 3 Beechcrest Lane, which was an addition to the home in 2002, approved by the Historic Conservation Board. Our proposed area of placing the garage is fairly tucked away and hidden, and you actually have to drive all the way down and turn around to really get a visualization of that.
Dr. Tobler, can you explain the depth of the front yard from the road to the existing house?
It's at least 80 feet, I believe, and it's all grass. It's a big park-like. It actually gives, I think, our street the park-like feel. Most of the other homes are much closer to the streets. So it's just an important visual part of the grass in the front yard to the Beechcrest Lane aesthetics. And so, this garage with the circle does come up a little bit later, but that is an addition, and it is something that is visibly noticed on our street. Next slide, please. Looking up at our house from the streets, you can see that garage addition with the red circle again is very noticeable. It is farther forward and closer to the street than our proposal, and it obstructs the actual home of 3 Beechcrest Lane coming from this direction. Next slide. This house was brought up earlier. This is a very prominent and important house. It was built by Harold Wurlitzer, who created the entire subdivision of Beechcrest Lane. In 1991, that structure was added. It's probably the most visible part of the house from the streets, and is very noticeable. It's modern in structure, but I'm not an architect, so I can't really address that. And I don't know what was there before, but a noticeable forward-facing attached 3-car garage to that home. This is 1831 Keys Crescent, which is also a historically significant home in East Walnut Hills. It's the Keys Hollister home. It's one of 4 remaining original estate homes. It underwent a renovation in 2018 approved by the Historic Conservation Board. On the left of the house, this is before the renovation. You can maybe see the edge of the previous garage, which is tucked behind the actual home. Go down to the next slide. You can see that there's a much more visible and apparent two-story, two-car garage. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the forward rotation and advancement of that garage structure from before the renovation to after the renovation, and actually also brought that garage structure much closer to the abutting parcel. Next slide. This is another home on Keys Crescent, an important street in our neighborhood, 1834 Keys Crescent. This is actually a 4,700 square foot home, but from the street, the only thing that is visible is a 968 square foot garage and a 968 square foot living space above it for a total of close to 2,000 square feet. So this garage structure completely obstructs any visualization of the home from the street. It is also attached. Another home, 1875, also very historically significant, built by Rufus Smith, who was the president of the First National Bank of Cincinnati, which is now U.S. Bank. Gambles have lived in this house, Scripps have lived in this house. This has another prominent, visible from the street, three-car garage that is attached by a small hallway. And this actually sticks out perpendicular to the front of the house, so it's not tucked behind. I do not know if this is original or if this was an addition. I was not able to locate that information, but another home that we use an example of a forward-facing garage structure of the home. Next slide. This is the only other English-style cottage house that we know of in East Walnut Hills. And the main point I'm bringing this up is, although that the guidelines state that the most common or a very common feature is garages in the back of properties, that's not the case for many homes. In this case, it's an attached garage, an integrated garage, as it may be called. You can go to the next slide to see it. It does not have a detached garage in the rear of the property. And in fact, on Beechcrest Lane, our own home, number 7, Beechcrest has a three-car garage just like this. So although common to have detached garage in the rear of the property, there's many, many homes in our district that are not that way. And then I have one more slide, or sorry, I have a couple more. So this is a view of our home and our garage, the site that we're planning to build. And this is from basically the property line of One Beechcrest looking south. And this is this is where we had to store our family car. Preferably, we'd like to have it in a garage for many reasons. Aesthetics is one of them. We just feel like that it would definitely appear much better, but also have a lot of conveniences. You'll see in our plans that we do want to convert to electric vehicles, and we feel like the installation of electrical stations in our garage will be much more accommodated in a new structure that we could build. This is an overlay of the property. The blue line marks the borders of our property. The yellow structures are many buildings. Most of them are garages. Some are pool houses that abut our property. So we're very used to having garage structures or other buildings lining our entire property. In fact, we've planted a lot of trees to try to give us some privacy in those areas. The purple marks the home of One Beechcrest Lane. And you can see that our garage structure, which is built in there that we're proposing to build, still sits back behind all these structures that are opposing us on 1 and 3 Beechcrest Lane. And so we feel like that we've placed this tucked away in a corner that is gonna be ideal position for building. And I'll let our architects get into that a little bit later. In the process of doing this, we did consider views from Beechcrest 1 and from the street. So you can scroll down to the next slide. This is a visualization that I want to demonstrate of the garage addition that occurred at 3 Beechcrest Lane in 2002. This is from the midpoint of our sunroom on the south side of our property. And this is showing what the view would have been without the addition of the garage. Next slide. This shows the obstruction, nearly 40% that we have experienced, and this is in fact true. When we look out the side of this house, we completely are obstructed by the visualization of that garage. Next slide down. This is a view of One Beachcrest from the rear of their backyard at a table that's important to them, where they sit and have dinners a couple times a month, and we wanted to visualize what the obstruction would be of this structure that we're proposing to build, which is the blue square. Next slide. And although there is some minor obstruction, there's still a significant vista open to see the entire center of our street, which is what they've suggested they are trying to preserve. This is looking north from our garage to One Beachcrest Lane. That red line is a measured distance of the corner of the garage structure that we are proposing to build. The yellow marks a structure that was put in place by the owners of One Beachcrest Lane to visualize the impact of the structure that we're building. It was placed almost 9 feet further further east than our current structure, and is very misleading to the exact place of where the garage will be built. I measured it at 39 feet and 7 inches. The red marker is at 31 feet, 0.15, and 1.5 foot, which is the exact place it will be. And I want to show why this is important, because if you go look at the circle and see how this can change the visual obstruction, it's a remarkable change. Next slide, please. So this is a photo from the streets. I did put a zoom in so you can see that I did have the red and yellow lines at the exact markers. And I agree, if we were building something that's obstructed from where their yellow marker is, it would be a significant obstruction. But in fact, our structure is being placed at that red line, not nearly that high. It's just a vertical line to point where it is. And there's still a large vista into their backyard. In fact, in a more clear picture, you can see the northern pool house structure that's very far back in their backyard. This is a comparison of the before and after of the proposed structure. What's important to note from the front elevation surface is that you're only going to see an 8% increase in visual change. That's 258 square feet. So we are making addition, we are making it larger, and we are bringing it forward. But the actual visualization of it is not as significant. That we feel like it would not fit into the historic conservation based on what we have seen of other homes within the district.
And Dr. Tobler, I want to ask you to identify what we've marked as Exhibit 12, and this is the first of the exhibits that's not currently included in the packet. Can you identify that?
This is a view
It
from
is in the hard copy packet that I've distributed, not in what we filed on the 11th.
This is a view that you can see from our home, facing towards One Beachcrest, facing north. To the right of the electrical boxes, you can see a little bit of that red reflector that's there. It's kind of hard to visualize. On the property of One Beachcrest, you can see their ladder structure, which they did move back last Wednesday to closer represent the position of the garage structure, but still is a little bit off.
Doctor, did you have anything else that you wanted to say at this point?
Not right now.
No other questions for Dr. Tobler?
Mr. Burley, do you have any objection to the new exhibits?
I don't believe all of them have been, I believe only through 12 have been offered at this point.
Correct. The others will be offered through the architect.
I have no objection to the exhibits offered thus far.
Okay. You go up there. Steve, can you please identify yourself?
Steve Ginter, Architects 2.
Can you briefly describe what your experience is in doing historic architectural work?
Started my company in 1992. We focus on residential architecture, almost 95% plus. As far as history and working on historic buildings, I've worked on projects on Anwood, actually specifically on 7 Beechcrest. There's a full remodel and rear addition to that, which went through the historic board. One of my latest projects, which I don't believe is historic, but I guess if you think of a 1926 Tudor, which was the Alberley Estate, full renovation of that. So over the years, just smaller projects sort of in the same thing. And actually, I just had a project that was approved on Sachem Avenue here right a month ago, 2 months ago, that I think was allotted and applauded. So I've worked on residential and historic projects in the past. Kind of a little bit of my focus.
Do you want to go ahead and explain this project?
Yeah, so the Toblers engaged me to look at their project, knowing it was in a historic district. Also understanding that, you know, they're sensitive to the ability to update their house and bring it, you know, to a lifestyle that was enjoyed by everyone else in the neighborhood, just for that. But part of the project and what they wanted is they needed a 3-car garage as part of the project. They wanted support on the first floor, which was the laundry room and a keeping room. The attached garage portion of this was to allow them weather connection. And also, as part of the project, they have the existing 19 foot by 19 foot garage in the back that is difficult for them to utilize, especially with a larger car and with the children. So the intent of this, because we looked at other things for the project, but this is what we came down to, is that the most important part was the garage and the support for the house. To do this, they wanted to keep the historical garage portion in the back, but repurpose it in the future. It's not really part of this project other than the fact that we're going to connect, maybe clean up some of those connections. But the ability to use that was to have a weather connection, which is really truly the keeping area, and in the laundry rooms to the side of that to give them service entry also, but to allow them to go into that covered terrace area. The main driver of that also is they do have a very slender rear yard for this project. And as you go to the south, you get closer to another 2-story garage on lot 3. Right behind them, there's 3 feet away is a very large 2-story carriage house, then another carriage house. So the area that they have.
One of those carriage houses was recently approved for construction by this board.
Correct. So with that, the desire was really just to stay kind of where they are. There's a terrace that's been there for a while in the back that's just kind of too large. It's a lot of hardscape. They wanted to reduce that. There's really not a lot of area to play for the kids. That's private. We stay closer to the north side of the property. We get away from the carriage houses, which it's really kind of encircled by, and it gives them just a little bit of sky and a better place to be for the house. So those are really the driving parameters. One, they needed the garage to be able to utilize the house and live in a functional way. They needed good entry to the house and also to be able to repurpose that carriage house that we had in the back and gain some yard in the back. That landscape, lose the hardscape, reduce it and pull it back over to enjoy the backyard. That was really the critical aspects of this. So when we did this, we did look at various ways to do the project. Sort of similar, just in general, we had the conversation about the detached garage. But you know, you look at the example on lot number 3, and that garage is turned and its back is faced towards the solarium of lot number 2. We thought about this. We thought about, well, 2 different scenarios actually. We looked at north-facing garage doors, which would turn the building and be accessed the other way. And it didn't physically have enough room to utilize the garage and turn around and get in and out of the building. To the right, there wasn't enough apron for your cars. It also introduced a gable on the house, which is not historically correct for this house. Every pitch on this house is front to back. That pushed that garage, being able to do that and still keep entry into the house 15 feet further than what we have now into the front yard, which would dramatically affect number 1's views. So we decided that didn't work. We looked at south-facing garage doors. The south-facing garage doors that we looked at, actually, because of where the house is, we had to actually pull that even further up, and it was a 23-foot, 8-inch difference that it pushed it forward, which absolutely would hide any view for number one. So we decided that that wouldn't work either. I don't think that helped with the green space, and introduced the gable that didn't work also for that. So the final design that we submitted, which kind of married everything together to make their project successful, and even reducing it and dropping the roof line to be subordinate to the main building of the house, we thought was the best solution for everyone to make this project work. So with that, and to address the staff report that was put out, and just my response to that, one of it was, additions underneath the staff report and the guidelines. Number two was, respond to architecture of the original building. And I agree with the staff's report that it does. Number three, it says, identify, do not overpower the existing building. The staff report has a concern that the proposed addition has the potential to overpower the original building, and that there are very few examples that are prominent loaded garages that exist in the district. There are examples, and they've already been put forth to you, but one is directly on the street, which is 6 Beechcrest Lane, which was actually built by Howard Werliter, and it's a 3-car garage addition that was done and approved. And literally, and I don't know if you've been to see the site, it's really, that there's a house there, but that's what you see from the street, and it's much closer to the street than what we are.
And by the way, how far from the street is the Tobler home?
The Tobler home, we're 83 feet. I know we're approximately 20 feet, 19 feet plus behind the garage to the left and the house to the right for our new addition. And it's not directly in line, I know, but subtle. It is 6 inches behind the face of the existing house from where it's set. The other piece that you don't see here is that the kitchen center with the bedroom above sits back, it's like 11 feet, 10 inches. So with that, this really, and especially with the way the roofs work, they're not in line like this. They separate themselves, which I think you can see you'll see in one of the exhibits, to let that building stand out as its own feature for the home, for that. Okay. So it's 25'9" away from there. Even with that, the existing breakfast and kitchen area that's there, we staged back another wall to allow it to have a total visual separation material-wise for that. And it really does help us with what we're trying to do. The proposed garage, and most of it, that's creating that roof and massing, because if you created the rectangle for that garage, it's 778 square feet, which is similar to most of the other garages that are anywhere near this size for 3-car in the neighborhood. So that's what actually creates that roof line, and the width is the 778 square feet for the roof. The rest of it, anything else that's happening, which is the laundry behind it, is absolutely subservient to that. It doesn't affect it in any way for view to the street and maintaining the historic guidelines that we have. The proposed new, or the existing residence is a 3-story residence. So up underneath those windows that you see, that's the second story. Up above that is a 3rd-story element, and they're utilizing that right now. Ours is, I'd call it a 1.5 story, in a sense, 2 stories, because we're utilizing and trying to do the same thing. We have some usable space there, but we placed it inside of the trusses for that. And part of this, if you notice the roof line to the right, and you see the carriage house, you have the main block of that building, you have the secondary portion of the building, which was the kitchen and possible service quarters. Above, we've even dropped, the gutter line is even dropped, and the roof is dropped besides the separation elements to try and distinguish the building as its own element for the house. That way also it's distinguishable as to the use of materials for this. So connections, keep them simple. I agree with the staff report on that. They agree that it's been done that way. We jumped to new construction underneath this. Number one, materials, use natural materials when possible. Materials should be similar in color, texture, and scale to the building materials found in the district's contributing buildings. I agree with the staff on this also. They agree with what we've done. Scale and massing, that's number 2, and it's to match the district. The staff, says there's few examples of large-scale front-loaded attached garages in the existing district. We've seen some of those. There are several examples of construction garages in addition. Most are detached, is what he says, but attached garages are found in the district and are typically oriented away from the streets, so they're not front-loaded, he says. Garage entries are not prominent features of contributing buildings. We have those. I guess we just showed you Wurlitzer as an example, and we've talked about 1831 Keys Crescent. We've talked about an 1875 Keys Crescent. Part of this also in the staff report, he's using percentages and widths of the building. 2 Beechcrest, the existing footprint of the first floor is 2,108 square feet. The proposed garage footprint, which creates that massing, which is the piece that we're really discerning here, is 778 square feet. So it's 37% of the first floor. And, the percentages can be used for your benefit or against to argue against you, depending on what numbers you want to select for this. I just think it's about good design. 1831 Keys Crescent square footage is per the auditor, is 2,441 square feet. The garage footprint is similar to ours at 784 for the first floor. They're calling it 1,500 plus, but that's including the second floor, which we're not counting. Does help with the massing, but it's about the main block and how it works. That's 32% of the main house. And that is a garage forward addition. If you just use the main body of the house, which you see in the percentages here where they're cutting off for the use of percentages, that main body is about 1726. And if you use that percentage, that jumps to a 35% scale to the house. So once again, using percentages. 2 Beechcrest, the full house is 119 feet wide. The garage is 33 and a half feet wide that we have separated by 29 feet. That's 28% of the house width in percentage. 6 Beechcrest, using the same exact measurements, is 126 foot 8 wide, using the auditor's information. And the garage is 34.9 feet. That's 28%. It's the exact same percentage that we have. So there are examples of the garages in the neighborhood, especially on a prominent house like that. As a note, you think about, other ways to do this. You look at the surface area, and I believe Dr. Tobler mentioned this. We added 258 square feet to this. To the front facade, there's literally 3,091 square feet on that as-built drawing above. One below adds 258 square feet. It's an 8% increase in the exposure to the front of the home.
And Steve, if we just looked at the front of those 2 homes, isn't it true that from the southeast end of the solarium or playroom to the northeast end of the existing garage, that dimension is precisely the same as the dimension with the new construction would be?
Yeah, we're aligning the existing carriage house up with the new carriage house proposal with the existing carriage house that's there. Just so, and as far as the historic board is concerned, we're at 10 feet away from the property. We thought that if that's where it is right now. As a detached, it could go to within 3 feet. Once again, we were trying to reduce the impact on lot number 1 with that in the consideration of the garage itself. It'd be nice to have a little bit wider garage. We squeezed it down. The doors are 10'8" on center. They work between each other, but the sides are tight for opening doors for the passenger on the north and the driver on the south. So it's still, about as small as I think I can make the 3-car garage for this. So beyond that, we went to number 3 in the staff report under the new construction. It's height and consider the surroundings. This project has the biggest front yard in the whole neighborhood or on Beechcrest. Other than, once again, I haven't been down behind to see the house that sits down behind it. But the main feature, and I've been on the street many times, working and visiting. So when you come in and you're driving, our house sits up to the right and up high, and the new proposed garage is not really discovered until you come around and look back. The majority of it is that way. So, but they have the largest yard, and the house is set back. pretty deep on the property line. And it's literally 88 feet, 3 inches, if you're looking for the correct number. The project, or to the right, or number 1 is 69 feet, and then the new carriage house in the front yard of number 3 is approximately 69 feet also. So we're 19 feet behind those other structures just to begin with that. And so the next one is for detailing of wood constructions and featureless boxes. I agree with the staff report. I think that the architecture speaks for itself in that sense. And then it's siding, number 5, and it says, stay within line of the neighbor's buildings. New structures should be sided with setbacks similar to those of the adjacent buildings. We are farther behind them. You should be sided to respect the current topography. We're building on an area that's a little bit flatter land. It allows, even if that, you think about the hardscape that's going to be created, it's even rotated up, so you're not going to see as much hardscape in the front that you would if we pushed that all the way up in line with them and put that on the hillside. So that was a sensitivity to that also. So with that, and it's kind of the same response that we had for number 3 is that the house is sided back, 19 feet behind the other neighbors. We have the largest park area really for the front yard, and we're trying to preserve the views to number 1, from number 1 down to that park based on that commentary that we had already, but even prior to that, we were trying to preserve that. From there, the staff inside of that same number is, number 5 in siding, sort of proposed that we keep the existing garage and we build in, between the existing structure and the garage with a larger SUV garage unit. That departs from every part of the wishes for the program and the function of the house that the Toblers were looking for to make this livable. If you do that, we disconnect and of course, get rid of the fact that we could use the other garage and repurpose it as an outdoor space, covered living space. But it also forces us to build back in behind the existing kitchen to gain those functions. The laundry room, it's just too tight to do anything else. And it increases the hardscape maybe for terrace area to enjoy back there, and it doesn't give them the ability to stay north of those existing garages that exist that were built up to the property. So once again, I think the initial concept of it would work for the garage itself, but it ignores the rest of the requirements for the project to do something like that. Let's see. So beyond that, alternate designs were proposed for this project. I think Graham Colby, New Public Architecture, I think they were submitted for this. They were submitted in plan view. I'm not sure exactly what they're intended to look like specifically, but design number 14, page 14, it takes this, I'm assuming the same 2-story garage and pushes it up against the property line, maybe a foot back farther than where we had the other, but that in the percentages that we use for all these calculations increases even more, and it's more disruptive to lot number 1 as a proposal. Page 15, it moves the existing garage back, and that tears down the new garage back, tears down the existing garage, and places the laundry in keeping areas to the left. I think this is the best of 4 that were put together, but it still forces us to build behind that garage and to the south, behind the house, and move our terrace area, which is really pretty much shown in his design, further down behind the garages that exist behind us. And increases the hardscape that we have on the lot. Number 16 is a suggested front garage, which blocks the garage on number 3. And we would still see we would see the garages probably even more prominently as you come down looking directly at them. Maybe the grade on that, it drops that garage down about 8 to 9 feet below the first floor. But you would see that exact same massing happening down there. And with that, the actual hardscape with the driveway coming all the way around that increases the hardscape in the front lawn / park area by 2.5%, or 2.5 times, not percent. So that one, and it's the impractical ability to, it might be a beautiful piece standing alone, but it's impractical for a family to use. Page 17 is the next design that was offered, and it has the garage, and I think this is staff was looking at too, and I think also mentioned it. being impractical, but it's tucked into the corner on the west and south property line. This one, it's probably up maybe 2 more feet. It's probably 7 feet below the first floor. But it increases the hardscape by 3 times to be able to make all this driveway work in the front. The square footage that is left up on the top, trying to get all the program that was inside of the garage that was a necessity for the Toblers, is still there. It's actually probably just a slight bit larger, if not equal. And this really is, I don't want to say doubling, all that, the builder can speak to that maybe, but the cost on this is extreme. The existing garage is kept, and I do like that in the terrace. That was one of the goals that we wanted, just to keep that and maintain that portion for reuse and it's the sort of value that it has.
Steve, I want to hand you what we've marked as Tobler exhibits 13 through 17. And while we don't have the ability to put this up on the screen, you've all got copies of that now. Can you explain what these are and who prepared these first of all?
So my 3D technician in my office prepared this. So this is a 3D model built off of our drawing specifically for what we have. The reason we
And you are
prepared
referring to Exhibit 13.
Exhibit 13. So it's a 3D model of this, and it's actually overlaid from a perspective of a photo down near the driveway, just above the driveway in lot number 3, looking back at lot number 1. One, it shows the separation of the carriage house from the main house. Specifically, you can see the way that, in a sense, the front to back pitch scissors to the other, and it gives you a view through that is the separation, so it's not a homogeneous roof, which I believe it's called. And it also has a 12-foot setback to the servant area of the home, which truly gives us a separation that we're looking for. Also, to the right of the garage, you can see all the way to the second pool house or the north pool house in the neighbor's property with this. And you can see the scale and the view and the use of the lawn, which we were kind of sensitive to. Exhibit 14 is the same. It's just the house itself. It's really what we had started with and put together just to see how the garage and carriage house related to the main structure. Also, I think there's some question and discussion of the portals and the eyes of the home. If, we consider different finishes and we all, for the project, and the garage doors are right now are shown as matching the colors for the trim on the house. And if you look to the left on the solarium, you'll see an element there that is 3 French doors with a lot of trim, which sort of matches the scale or the eyes of the garage door. Garage doors are difficult. Everybody admits that to deal with. But I think that was a nice approach and a sensitive approach to putting this together. Exhibit 15 is really, it's the same angle again. This is just closer up from the one that was taken farther down on Beechcrest towards the lot trees driveway. Also shows the separation of the structure and the fact that it is secondary to the main structure, and it's respectful to that. Number 16 is truly the photo overlay that we used. You can see the existing house and you can see the windows to the carriage house. We laid that over specifically to make sure that everything was in alignment for what we had for scale, not only using the site plan to elevate this, but imposing this onto the 3D. So once again, and there's also trees in the front yard of this too, and there's planting in the front yard, which will also probably mask just a little bit of what's going on with the garage. And I think there are plenty of opportunities to do with that. The last exhibit that I have is 17. I'm not specifically sure who prepared this, but it is a view from lot number 1's terrace area. I guess it's titled Obstructed Vista from 1 Beechcrest Lane with Proposed 52-foot wide addition.
To be clear, the base document that you were working with there was something that was prepared by Graham Caldy's firm. Isn't that correct?
That's my assumption, that it was prepared by him. So it was part of his presentation. When I look at this and you can see the 3D model and the ghosted house behind it, you can see the actual alignment of the existing gable ends. One of the main house, the other second is of the servants area. The pink line is the actual outline of the main portion of the home. So perspective wise, as I move west on lot one's property, it'll slowly start to eat up the perspective, but no way near what is drawn here and represented and been put forth to you all as a presentation of what views would be blocked. So I think we're absolutely demonstrated that we've provided that was required, or that we were trying to achieve from lot number one, and sensitivity.
Mr. Burley, now that you've seen the additional exhibits, do you have any objection?
I do not have any objections to the exhibits themselves, but I would like an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Ginter at some point. Happy to do that now or during our presentation, whichever the board would prefer.
After their case, we'll have an opportunity for cross-examination.
Can you, I didn't understand what you just said, I'm sorry.
After you finish presenting your case, there will be an opportunity for cross-examination.
Okay, I'd just like to suggest that it may be more appropriate to allow cross-examination to take place after each witness has spoken, but we'll do it whatever order you want to go in. I think he's available for cross-examination now.
It's really board's discretion if they want to wait for the applicant to present all of their witnesses and then cross-examine them, or cross-examine each witness after their individual testimony. So,
If you will allow cross-examination as we proceed, I'm fine with that. Mr. Burley, go ahead.
Mr. Ginter, thank you for being here today. You spoke at length about the requirements and necessities of your design. To be clear, you're talking about the direction you received from the Toblers, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So from this board's perspective, the only requirement or necessity is compliance with the guidelines. And you heard Mr. Owen say that he had concerns about your design. I understand that your client had goals for this project.
Correct.
If I heard you correctly, they wanted a 3-car garage with a keeping room that was attached to the main structure. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you have addressed Mr. Owen's concerns better if the garage was not 2-car, was not 3-car?
That's obvious. If it's a smaller scale, absolutely.
Could you have addressed his concerns better if there was not a keeping room?
Possibly we could push it back.
Could you have addressed his concerns better if this was not attached to the main structure?
All options that were proposed, but yes.
And just to be clear, have you ever set foot on the property of 1 Beechcrest Lane?
No, sir.
So you do not know whether that perspective you drew is accurate, correct?
The picture where it was located, we aligned it with what we had done aerially for this, which is available on Cages to set up the lines. And also the survey that was done prior. We picked the point and the perspective based on our known construction and field measure of the full existing structure that was there. So the perspective alignment that we did really puts me rather close, within 5%, I would say, maybe 10% of where that is. So the point of that and the overlay was just to show the exaggeration of the view blockage. So that's why that was created.
Just to be clear, you've never actually stood here where this photograph was taken from, correct?
Absolutely not.
Those are all the questions I have for this witness. Thank you.
Did you want to cross-examine the owners before we move further onto the case?
We have no questions for the owners.
We have nothing else to present at this point. Obviously, we would reserve the right to recall our witnesses in rebuttal if necessary.
Understood. Mr. Burley, it's now your opportunity to present your case.
Honorable members of the Historic Conservation Board, thank you for your time and attention this evening. I am JP Burley. I'm a lawyer at Suter LLC, located at 1502 Vine Street, 4th floor, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45202. And I am here on behalf of the property owners that own the property directly to the north of the property we're talking about this evening. Miss Erica Brown and Mr. Peter Blackshaw. They own 1 Beechcrest Lane. They've lived there since 2020, and they, as many property owners in the East Walnut Hills Historic District and all of our city's great historic districts, bought into a neighborhood with the reasonable expectation that the guidelines would be a protective force for their investment, the greatest investment of their lives. They bought in to a particular pattern of development and historic character. And they are here today to express their concerns to you that what they bought into stands to be significantly disrupted if the application before you today is approved. And as you read in our letter, that is not simply their conclusion as a neighboring property owner. That is also the conclusion of 2 expert witnesses that we plan to present as well. You'll hear from Mr. Graham Colbley that they actually his architecture firm did an inventory of all of the garages, detached carriage houses in the East Walnut Hills Historic District. And although you can emphasize numbers in a certain way, as you just heard from Mr. Ginter, there is nothing in terms of overall scale that could serve as precedent for what's being proposed here today. Nearly without exception, all garages and carriage houses in this district serve a subservient role that very much takes a respectful backseat to the principal structure. That respectful backseat is actually the language from the guidelines. And the proposed addition in this instance is simply disproportionate to the principal structure. It does not respond to the existing structure at 2 Beechcrest Lane. And it certainly is not compatible with the existing structures at 1 Beechcrest Lane. It's so incompatible that we actually have a professional realtor who has given the opinion that if this was proposed, that 1 Beechcrest Lane could suffer a loss in property value of up to 30 to 40%. That's significant, and it's something that this board should take into consideration in considering overall compatibility and harmony with the historic built environment of Beechcrest Lane. So for all the reasons we've said in our letter and for the reasons that you're about to hear from our witnesses, we would respectfully ask that you deny the application as proposed. Importantly, my clients are not opposed to a 3-car garage in all forms. There might very well be some design out there that fits better with the guidelines and would gather more support from the adjacent property owners. But this is not it. And until a better design is submitted, we submit that it is this board's duty to decline to grant a certificate of appropriateness. So I thank you for your time and attention. And as my first witness, I will call Mr. Graham Mr. Cawley, could you state your name and profession for the record, please?
Graham Cowley, principal and founder of New Republic Architecture.
And Mr. Cawley, are you a registered architect in the state of Ohio?
Yes, I am.
And how involved have you been in the past with historic preservation projects?
So my firm is regularly in front of this body. My firm was here earlier today in front of this body. A large portion of our work is in the city's historic districts, adaptively reusing, rehabilitating buildings and kind of improving the built environment of the city.
And when you first got involved with this project, what was the first thing you did just to understand what was being proposed?
Well, I visited the site, visited Erica's house and Pete's house, and just kind of went and sat on their back porch or solarium and viewed over 2 Beechcrest Lane and sort of the view aperture that they enjoy every day.
And did you also visit other properties in the district?
Yeah, Eric and I walked all of Beechcrest Lane, and then someone in our office walked every street, surveyed every street in the historic district, looking specifically at sort of carriage houses, carriage house additions, garage additions throughout the district.
And what was the result of that inventory? What did you conclude?
Vast majority of the homes in the district, I believe something like 154 homes in the district on both sides of Madison. The vast majority of them had a detached carriage house in the rear, very much subservient to the main house. A few examples had additions or of carriage house or garage nature, and some of them were cited in the previous presentation. I'm happy to talk about those as well.
And sure, let's that conclusion is already in the letter for the board, but just let's get into what was presented just now. There were several examples that were presented for this board. Do any of those change your overall conclusion about the dominant form of garages and carriage houses in the district?
No, there were 4 examples that were cited, and I'll just take them in random order. 6 Beechcrest Lane. I don't know if we want to pull that up or.
Would it be possible to show the structures that were mentioned in the applicant's presentation, please?
Six Beechcrest Lane is page 6 of Exhibit 1.
So I'd submit to the board that while this is an addition, it's a very low slung, very subservient addition to the main house. It kind of perpetuates the undulating roof line that you see throughout the district. And so it takes a very much a subordinate and backseat role to its role as sort of a carriage house or a garage addition. The next one, for example, 1834 Keys Crescent. So that's it right there, a 4-car garage. So this one, if you know the lot at all, the lot is at the end of a circle, and the lot, there really can't be an addition placed anywhere else on the lot in order to serve a garage use with some carriage house program above. So this is where it really has to be for this one. There is no other option at all on this site that works. 1875 Keys Crescent. The lot is so big, if you were able to climb in on Google Earth, Street View, the lot is so large that it's going to be not only subservient to the house, but you can place it, you have flexibility to place it, and it's not going to be viewed by anybody on the street, nor is it going to obstruct any views. And so it's just kind of really tucked back there. It's lot specific. So some lots in the district are more conducive to a carriage house placement that's closer to the main house. And then lastly, 1831 Keys Crescent. This is actually, this renovation was designed by one of the directors in our office. We removed a outdated garage that was much more behind, but we rotated it out and constructed a sympathetic addition that's somewhat detached, but also takes advantage of the grade. It's lower than the main house to sort of, again, emphasize that subservient nature of the addition to the main house. This also sort of preserves the undulating roof line throughout the entire home.
The applicant also offered 3 Beechcrest Lane as an example of a garage that would be precedential. That's in Exhibit 1, I believe it's Page 4. Page 5. Look at this garage.
We did, and so that one is detached and removed from the main house, again, subservient, and it's lot, that house's lot is a different configuration that allows for, I believe it actually has two carriage houses. So that lot has the luxury of, or has the configuration to be, to put the carriage house off to the side and the rear.
Did you look at 5 Anwood Lane?
Not for, so 5 Anlin Lane looks to have an attached garage that sort of is very subservient to the house, takes very clearly a backseat to the main house.
So that's the common trend, that all of these garages take a respectful back seat. And in your opinion, does the garage in this case do that?
If you're gonna ask a question, but boy, that led to a conclusion without a question.
Or was that an objection?
I thought I said that.
Okay.
If you could rephrase, please.
Based on all of the observations your firm has made of the garages and carriage houses in this district, is there any precedent for what is being proposed here?
We do not see any precedent for a garage / carriage house that is in this prominent a location on a lot.
And let's walk through the specific reasoning of that in depth. Mr. Owens, could we pull up some of these slides that are included as Exhibit B in our written statement, please? Could we start at what's been marked as page 2 of Exhibit B? Mr. Colby, could you explain this graphic to the board, please?
Sure. So this is the applicant's site plan as part of the application to the Historic Conservation Board. And really, it just illustrates that sort of the nature of carriage houses, garages, all being subservient, all being placed to the rear and very much to the sides of the lots. So you can see, I guess it's 3 Beechcrest Lane has a couple of carriage houses and they're kind of really nestled up against the garage.
It looks like we may need a little break. We're going at this for a couple hours. Is the board okay if we recess for about 5 minutes to stand up, use the restroom, all that fun stuff? Okay, we'll be back.
I'm gonna do it, yep.
Mr. Owens, could we see page 3 of Exhibit B, please? And Mr. Colby, there are blue and red circles on these graphics. What do those indicate, please?
So those indicate the carriage houses and their placement throughout both the 1950 Sanborn map and the 2024 Cages Street base map. Kind of showing that everything is subservient, all the carriage houses are subservient into the rear of the properties along, specifically along Beechcrest Lane and Baker Place.
Can we see page 4, please? What did you observe about the roof line, Mr. Colby?
So just, a lot of the houses, especially on Beechcrest Lane, have sort of this delightful undulating roof line. And 2 Beechcrest Lane was no exception. Going from the solarium or sunroom or whatever it is on the left-hand side of the graphic to the original carriage house on the right, sort of the ups and downs kind of preserve this sort of undulating roof line that helps to break up the scale.
What's the overall effect of a homogenized roof line?
So it just, again, it reinforces that the building, the addition as proposed sort of is now competing with the main structure.
You see page 5, please. What did you observe about the siting of garages and carriage houses in this district compared to the principal structure as it relates to this graphic?
So they're all, except for the one example that we sort of talked about, the 1834 Keys Crescent, they're all sort of back from the main elevation of the house. And the addition as currently proposed at 2 Beechcrest Lane is sort of right in line with the main house. So there's not as much of a hierarchy in that front elevation that you see when you're perceiving the building.
What was the typical footprint of one of these garages or carriage houses as compared to the principal structure?
It's a very low percentage, 10 to 20% at the most.
10 to 20%?
At the most, I believe.
Can you see page 6, please? And what is the footprint that you calculated of this proposed garage?
So the main house, not including the sort of sunroom or playroom, 1,750 square feet, to the addition over here in the red, you can see proportionally 33 plus feet in the width versus 45 plus feet in the blue. So it just has a large presence on the site.
Did you find any structure that comes even close to 63% of the main house footprint in your inventory?
We did not do that math, but everything visually that we observed was significantly less.
Can you repeat the typical range that you saw?
I think it was 10 to 20% max.
And could we see pages 7 and 8, please? Mr. Colby, have you been to 1 Beechcrest Lane?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this view?
Yes, I'm familiar with this view.
And is this accurate from your perspective?
This is as best as we can kind of determine. We did not walk onto the property at 2 Beechcrest Lane to place markers. And we did not have time to prepare a 3D model. This is a representation of what we believe would be perceived from 1 Beechcrest Lane.
Could we see page 9, please? what's shown in this graphic, Mr. Copley?
So this is this will be the north elevation of the building, of the Two Beechcrest Lanes addition over on the left-hand side, plus the garage, the existing carriage house on the right-hand side.
So what's the total width that one Beechcrest Lane will be facing south into?
So the total width would be 51'2". The addition is 31'2".
And did your firm prepare potential alternative designs to address some of the concerns that Ms. Brown and Mr. Blackshaw have with non-compliance with the guidelines?
We're not the designer. We wouldn't presume to be as such. We prepared a series of graphics to show alternate locations on the site for different parts and pieces of the Two Beechcrest Lanes desired program. Some of which kind of break that apart, some of which kind of remove the existing carriage house, just to show that there are options available to be studied. We had no reason to believe that anything was studied or wasn't studied. That just simply wasn't part of the report or the application.
In your professional opinion, are there design alternatives that would be in better compliance with the guidelines?
I think so, yes.
And you did a very thorough job explaining your conclusions in the letter, but just to be very specific, under the criteria for building rehabilitation and alteration, there's the directive, maintain the roof line. Do you believe that this design does that?
It certainly waters down the eccentric roof line.
Under additions, the first is compatibility, and consider the addition as new construction. Do you believe that this design is compatible within the meaning of that guideline?
Not in its current form.
Number two is design, respond to the architecture of the original building. And that also includes, quote, the design should also respond in a more general way to adjacent buildings, unquote. Do you believe that this design meets that provision of the guidelines?
So the materials and the roof, the materials and are kind of in keeping with the main house. But again, siding is the challenge.
So that the scale and siting of this design, do the scale and siting of this design respond specifically to the architecture of the original build?
I think the scale and the siding do not.
Do the scale and siting respond in a more general way to adjacent buildings in the district?
I do not believe so.
Number three is identity do not overpower the existing building. Do you believe that this proposed addition would overpower the existing building?
So garage doors are tough, as was cited by the applicant's architect. But it's special care needs to be taken on a house like this with sort of the eyes of the building. A lot of the windows are very sort of demure and delicate. And so it's tough to do.
And the specific language is the addition should take a respectful back seat. Do you believe that this addition takes a respectful back seat?
Not at this time.
Number four is connections, keep them simple. And specifically, it states that significant architectural features of the original building should not be destroyed, removed, or obscured by the addition. Do you believe that this provision has been met?
I think it could be met better.
Is the existing carriage house a significant architectural feature of the original structure?
I think it's important. And one of the sort of ideas that we had we suggested it could be pulled down to fit the program. That's not where our firm lies typically, in terms of preserving what we have in sort of the built environment.
And would this design actually obscure the existing carriage house entirely?
It depends on from the street, yes.
Under new construction, number 2 is scale and massing match the district. Do you believe that the scale and massing match the district within the meaning of that provision of the guidelines?
Not as currently proposed.
And lastly, number 5 is siting. And specifically, it says, where applicable, they should be located to respect views. Do you believe the siting, as proposed in this instance, respects views and is compliant with this provision of the
I
guidelines?
don't think it's compliant. I think it could do a better job of respecting views.
So do any of the examples cited by the applicant in writing or here today change your overall opinion that this design is not compliant with the guidelines? Do you have anything else you'd like the board to know today?
I think just the idea that we were brought in to help advise our client, and that we're not opposed to, and I think I speak for our client when we say we're not opposed to an addition. Just the idea that maybe some spirit of collaboration could be embraced in order to get a more workable solution for the entire district and to set a good precedent going forward. You know, certainly I think the opposition understands that families grow, families need extra space. We want people to be in the city. It's an awesome neighborhood. I'm actually moving there myself next month, or moving close. So we certainly see that. But I think some collaboration would be a great first step.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Those are all the questions we have for this witness.
Mr. Burke, would you like to cross-examine?
Yes, please. Mr. Colby, in your letter, as part of the record, you reach the conclusion that without exception, our analysis of existing historic carriage houses found that in all instances throughout the district, such accessory structures were deliberately located to the side and very much to the rear of the main house in a subordinate manner. Let me ask you first about the most recently approved carriage house on 3 Beechcrest Lane. That essentially sits in 2 Beechcrest Lane's front yard, doesn't it? Sits well in front of 2 Beechcrest Lanes.
I think you have to look at it in terms of the overall site configuration on a per lot
My
basis.
question is, does the second carriage house on 3 Beechcrest Lane sit in front of 2 Beechcrest Lane's home?
It sits forward of 2 Beechcrest Lane, but not when you consider it in the relationship of the home, the primary home.
That garage is closer to the street than the Tobler's home is, isn't it?
Yes.
And 6 Beechcrest Lane, that large 3-car garage sits closer to the street than the main house does, doesn't it?
I can't tell from my photograph. It may, but it's still.
You've inspected the street, correct?
I can't tell from this particular photograph.
You-
But what I can tell you is that it is entirely, it is much more subservient to its primary residence than to Beechcrest Lane.
When you walked the street, which you've indicated that you did, you saw that garage, correct? And that garage is closer to the street than the main house is, isn't it?
Very well, maybe.
It's not very much to the rear of the main house, is it?
It's one example in 150 some houses in the district.
And why did you not note that and instead you've concluded that in all instances throughout the district, your sentence in your letter doesn't
It's
admit
also-
to any exceptions to that statement, does it?
Okay, maybe there's one exception in 154 houses.
And the property on Keys Crescent, a number of those garages or carriage houses on Keys Crescent sit closer to the street than the main house does.
Again, it's all relative to the configuration of the lot in the main house.
But again, you wrote in your letter the bold statement that there are no exceptions.
They're all subservient.
But what you say is they were all deliberately located to the side and very much to the rear of the main house. That's not a true statement, is it?
I don't know, but maybe not.
You signed your name to it. Let me ask you about some of these other graphics. And frankly, the point that I'm going to make is the exaggerations that are being promoted here. First of all, let's look, if we can, at page 2 of the graphics. Now, you see where the Tobler house is, don't you?
Yes.
See where the second garage is for 3 Beechcrest?
Yes.
And in looking at that, you have to see that that sits in front of the Tobler home, doesn't it?
It's still subservient to it.
You can keep saying that,
It's
but
still
my question
perceived-
is
still perceived.
it in front of the Tobler home
It sits forward of the Tobler.
and closer to the street than the Tobler home does? And closer to the street than the proposed Tobler new garage would sit, doesn't it?
But in context of the house. it's
My
subservient.
question is trying to get some specifics instead of general conclusions. Isn't it true that that second garage on 3 Beechcrest is closer to Beechcrest significantly than the proposed Tobler garage would be?
Yes.
And can we look please at page 3? You didn't circle the 6 Beechcrest Lane garage, did you?
On the 1950 map, it wasn't there.
No, on the 2024 map.
And no, we didn't.
Why
Is
not?
it there? Is it there? I can't see it.
But there is a garage there at 6 Beechcrest Lane that sits very close to the road, doesn't it? Can we look at page 4? There's no standard that requires roofs be homogenized or undulated, is there?
I think the guidelines refer to varying roof heights.
And the proposal here would still have 2 Beechcrest Lane having varying roof heights, wouldn't it?
Not as many.
Not as many. Can we go please to page 6? This purports to show that the new proposed garage and second floor would make up 73% of the main elevation width. Is that right? 33 and 40, yes.
And the only way you get to that is by only measuring a portion of the front elevation of the house, isn't it?
I think it says the main elevation of the house, which would be the main
So-
two-story body of the house.
Why do we leave out the kitchen area? Why do we leave out the playroom or solarium, if you wanted to call it that? And you don't consider those as part of the main house?
Because we do consider them part of the main house, but you have the garage, which is sitting in front of or in parallel with the main line of the house, the main elevation of the house. That's the comparison.
When you look at the house from Beechcrest as it exists today, you essentially see the entire house, playroom, solarium, kitchen area, and the garage as one use, don't you?
Yes, and you see them as 2 stories, 1 stories.
Let's go to page 7, please. By the way, the wall that exists along your client's property line, that's their wall, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Did you determine whether or not it is?
I would assume so because it faces, the water garden faces 1 Beechcrest Lane. And it retains the garden above 2 Beechcrest Lane's garage.
And I gather that's the water garden where the wall comes up and curves?
Correct.
And that wall in and of itself blocks some of the view down the street, doesn't it?
Barely.
Barely?
I think it's probably 4 feet tall and 6 feet wide at its most.
If you're sitting at the table there, can you see down to the cul-de-sac path? The cul-de-sac park.
I think you can see the entire the view corridor, sitting or standing.
And if we can look at page 8. You can see through the graphic that you put up there where the existing house is, can't you?
Yes.
How is it then that you were able to get the front of the garage, which we know is on the same line as the front of the existing house, and now you've got the front of the garage well in front of the existing house?
That is the representation we can create without being able to A, create a 3D model, or B, be on 2 Beechcrest Lane's property.
And even with what we believe to be a terribly inaccurate description, you can still see down to the cul-de-sac park, can't you?
Not nearly as much as you can currently.
And does your client own any view easement across the Tobler's front yard?
No, but the guidelines call for preservation of views.
All views?
Preservation of views.
I think even the city would take the position that they're entitled to stop all changes that change views, because any change does change views, doesn't it?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to generally object to this line of questioning. It's really argumentative and not effective at advancing the actual arguments being made here.
I'm sorry, cross-examination is sometimes aggressive, especially when we believe that things are being misrepresented.
I think go ahead and continue. Keep an eye on it.
Can we go to page 9, please? Your clients own a pool house that is right on their property line with the Toblers, don't they?
Yes.
You didn't consider that when you looked at this graphic, did you?
That's not what this graphic is intended to show.
No, it's intended to misrepresent what the Toblers are doing, isn't it?
No, it's just that's intended to show the front of the house and the front of the addition all line.
The existing garage is the first 20 feet of that, isn't it? So the proposed addition is not a 51-foot addition, is it?
No, it's a 31'2" addition. This diagram is meant to convey that it's 51'2", and it's parallel with the front of the house.
Page 14. Can you explain again what the purpose of this series was? Because as I understood it, you were indicating that, well, maybe these might be alternatives.
There's certainly alternatives. Any design, there are alternatives that you study, and these are simply meant to show that opposition is willing to work with Two Beechcrest Lane to come to an agreeable solution.
Is it your testimony that your clients would be willing to have the garage built within 3 feet of their property?
These are just suggestions as to what.
Is it your testimony that your clients would be willing to have the garage built within 3 feet of their property line?
These are simply suggestions of what could happen in a collaborative environment.
And page 16 and 17. Is it your testimony that either of these proposals with all that additional hardscaping would be better solutions than what the Toblers are proposing to do?
Perhaps.
I have no other questions.
Mr. Colbley,
I'm sorry, you need to call an additional witness, in your case. No rebuttal for.
understood. Thank you, and we will call Miss Erica Brown. Good evening, Ms. Brown, as it is the evening now. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name's Erica Brown and I live at 1 Beechcrest Lane,
How long have you lived at 1 Beechcrest Lane?
5 years.
And what initially attracted you to that property when you bought it?
Well, first I'll tell you, both my parents are history and anthropology professors. I have an art history minor from Lafayette College, and I'm a daughter of the Mayflower for what it's worth. The point is I grew up appreciating history. So when we had an opportunity to move to historic Walnut Hills, we jumped on it. And we jumped on it because in historic East Walnut Hills, you're celebrating, appreciating, and protecting the architectural gems in the community. And I can even talk to them, like over the last couple of weeks, there's always a silver lining. I've walked all 154 pieces of property. I've interviewed neighbors. I've researched, and I gotta tell you, it made me appreciate the precious gift our early community planners and architects gave us. And we're truly lucky. And I actually have a picture of Leonard Willick, who designed 1 Beechcrest Lane. And we love 1 Beechcrest Lane because the natural light, the infinity views from the backyard. And I can tell you, because I live there, I lift up the shades every day from the window, and those will be directly blocked by that structure. period, full stop. If you sit on the table where we eat all summer outside, you're looking at a structure. If you're on the pool, you're looking at a structure. We love that view, that infinity view we talk about, as well as everybody else. And we feel very fortunate, that we're in that house. He designed the house to live in the southern part of the house. So the main area is facing that 51-foot, wall. I honestly never imagined I'd be here today trying to defend the historic integrity of One Beechcrest Lane. One Beechcrest Lane was in the Architectural Magazine in 1922. This home has been celebrated. When we bought the home, the historic guidelines were even included in the pamphlet. This truly never entered my mind. But anyway, the bottom line is we feel lucky, we love the view. It's an infinity view, the sunlight's incredible, and it could be changed drastically.
How long do you plan to live at One Beechcrest Lane?
For the indefinite future, I work at Procter & Gamble. Pete is doing another startup in Cincinnati. So why would we ever leave? Just for the reasons they love it, we all love it. Wood burns on fire. There's so many coffee shops. We're walking to Pilates. We all feel very lucky to live in the area.
And do you have children as well?
Yes, we have 3 kids, a dog, and my mother is sick and she lives with us.
When did you first receive a copy of the architectural plans in this case?
When I asked the city on October 11th.
So just to be clear, was that after the application had been filed?
Yes. So we scrambled, we did our best to present, our opinions to you, to, respectfully ask this to be not denied. But like Graham said, we would have had 3D designs and more, but we did our best.
And let's get specific. You've talked about light or the impact on views, but why else are you concerned about this addition?
I honestly believe, and this is coming from the history side of my life, that this is a discussion about the future of historic East Walnut Hills. It's more than just a 3-car garage, 2-story attached. If it's a dangerous precedent could be set if we approve this. Because one house at a time, slowly but surely, a community changes and can become garage-centric, just like so many suburbs in the US. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm very familiar with our 2-story attached garages, and we want to keep them in New Jersey. The impact is devastating, not only to 2 Beechcrest Lane, which is a Cotswold-style cottage. It is so rare, unique, and special, but also to 1 Beechcrest Lane. The park-like views are gone. It goes from an open area kind of experience to a confined experience. And we lived in Mount Adams and we loved Mount Adams. It is a confined living, and that's okay. That's okay. That's the way it goes. But that's not the experience we bought into in East Walnut Hills. If the 51-foot wall existed back in 2019, we would not have purchased that house because it would have been looking at a wall just like Mount Adams. So many of the guidelines are being violated. I just want to underscore the new construction number 5, which is the siding, and the one for respecting views and respecting the neighborhood.
You said that if this addition was there originally, you would not have bought your home. Is that right?
We would not have bought a home where we're looking at a wall instead of the view, and the sunlight we wouldn't even have had the same experience. Like if you look at this brochure, you're going to see, and even in the article we sent out, because the house was featured in Cincinnati Refined, and one of the #1 selling features is this sunlight and these views, and that experience would be completely changed.
Do you believe that this addition, if constructed, would affect your property value?
That was my instinct, but we had a realtor give a proper opinion and confirm that it would be. and she'll talk to you about it.
Just to be clear, are you opposed to a 3-car garage in any and all form on Beach
Not
Crest
at
Lane?
all, not at all. We want our neighbors to be happy. I see a win-win-win. I think there's a way to have a 3-car garage. There's a way to hit the historic guidelines, and there's a way to not harm property values of your neighbors or neighborhood. So to answer that, we would passionately support them getting a 3-car garage in a way that really meets the historic guidelines.
If they had reached out to you sooner, would you have had that conversation with them?
Yeah, and we tried. But you know, it's water under the bridge and we can move forward.
Have you spoken with anyone from the East Walnut Hills Assembly about this?
Yes, so Passion drove us to the East Walnut Hills Assembly on November 6th. And we raised this concern about the production to Steve Ramos, the man in charge of development. And he has responded in writing that he opposes this build.
Just to be clear, has the East Walnut Hills Assembly voted on this?
They didn't have time to vote. And again, this is like, I got the news on October 11th, but he has said that he opposes it.
Is there anything else you'd like the board to know this evening?
No, I just appreciate your time, and I know this is a lengthy discussion. I do think it's a very important one from setting a precedent for historic East Walnut Hills. So thank you for taking it seriously.
Mr. Burke, cross-examination?
Few questions. First of all, the Toblers first told you about their project back in August, didn't they?
August 28th, they sent an email and it said, heads up, there's going to be some construction. The scale of this was not obvious. I've got the emails if you'd like, as another addendum.
I've seen the emails. Did you ask the Toblers to see their plans?
Actually, I wrote congratulations because I misunderstood it to that extent.
But you didn't ask them to see their plans.
On October 10th, when I asked them, hey, do you guys want to go in on some trees together? And they responded, don't worry about your privacy. Our structure will give you privacy. That's when I asked them because I was unaware. I could never imagine a project of this scale appearing in historic East Walnut Hills.
When you sent
blocking these views.
When you sent the email asking if they wanted to go into some trees together with them, what were you thinking about at that point?
Small little trees like Japanese maple. I just wanted to have a conversation with them and collaborate. That is the spirit in which I live my life.
You do not own a view easement across the Tobler's property, do you?
I don't know.
You don't hold any deed for a view easement across the Tobler's property, do you?
I don't know.
Let me show this to her, please. I'm showing you what.
Could you repeat the question, Mr. Burke?
I asked whether or not he owned a view easement across the Tobler property.
Thank you.
I've handed you a copy of Tobler Exhibit 7. You seen that document?
Yes.
What is it?
This is an email. This is a letter I wrote to the neighbors behind the Tobler.
Excuse me, it's not an email.
It's a letter, excuse me, I just said letter. Deep breathing. So this is a letter I sent to the folks behind the Toblers. And I was explaining that I was opposing the build. And in fact, what I said is, this is in regards to 2 Beechcrest Lane's 3-car garage proposal. At the time, it was 2,500 square feet. We plan to oppose the plan as is. We want our neighbors happy, just a scaled down version. If you'd like to appeal, you can simply write a letter to Doug. We missed the yellow card in the mail because I've been traveling with my sick mother. And so I thought maybe other people also had missed the yellow card in the mail. So I attached that. So yes, this is how much I care about the history and protecting the historic integrity of our neighborhood.
I want to be accurate. Who did you deliver this to?
The people right behind them. I think it's 2776.
And did you place this in their mailboxes?
I did.
And why did you exaggerate the size of what they were proposing to do?
At that moment, that was the square footage we had
And where did you get that square footage from?
from the city's plans, because no one was giving me information. I would happily sit down with them and talk about the square footage. Like, the spirit of this is us trying to protect the historic integrity of our street, of East Walnut Hills community.
Were you the one who calculated the square footage at 2,500 square feet?
I'm gonna be honest with you, if it was 1,700 square feet, it's not the spirit of this.
My question is, I'm trying to find out why you misrepresented facts to the neighbors to the rear of the Toblers.
I'll tell
The
you.
site they propose to build is about 2,000 square feet, not 2,500 square feet.
There were two versions, if I understand everything correctly. Version one had X, let's say it was 2,400. I truly tried my best to do the math. So if the math is wrong, it's an accident. Actually though, in my mind, I'm remembering the math was more than that. But you have to go back and look. But my question is, what's the intent of this questioning? Because the spirit of the act, whether it's 1,500 square feet or 2,000 square feet, is to protect the historic integrity of our street and our community.
Can we please go to the last page of that exhibit? Are these your notes?
They are my notes.
And can you explain, first of all, height plus 9 in the lower left-hand corner, what's that mean?
This was me, okay, I have dyslexia. I try to sketch things out because I learn differently and I wonder sometimes if other people do also. So I sketched out the new roof line and attempted to show the height increase.
But you don't know whether or not that height is accurate or not?
It was to the best of my ability on that day.
And if I call our architect back up on rebuttal, and he testifies that the height difference will only be 6.5 feet, would that surprise you?
Actually, I'm having a flashback. Tobes told me the first height was 26.5. So, but I learned that after this. I really think this conversation is bigger than 6 inches here, a foot here. I think the conversation we're having is about historic integrity. Okay, anyway, that's how I feel. I really hope the board is appreciating this position.
I think I'm entitled to get questions answered instead of speeches made. I will try one more time. Would it surprise you to learn that where you have that arrow drawn, you have misrepresented the facts by almost 40%?
Would that surprise me?
Yes.
That would surprise me.
And similarly, with regard to where you've got the arrow with 18 feet, if I call Mr. Ginter back up here and he testifies that the height difference is only 13.5 square feet, I'm sorry, 18.5 feet, would that surprise you?
It would surprise me, and I'm gonna tell you that this isn't the problem. Right?
That's not my question. I'm trying to pin down facts.
I am just
You want
gonna
to
say,
give speeches.
for the record, I did my best math with what I had in hand.
I don't have any other questions for her.
Riley, if you'd call your next witness.
We call Miss Maria Wally, please. Good evening, Miss Wally. Could you state your name and occupation for the record?
Maria Wally, and I'm a real estate agent with Comey and Shepherd.
Where's your office, Miss Wally?
I have an office in Walnut Hills, East Walnut Hills at 3 Copley.
And are you a certified realtor in the state of Ohio?
Yes.
How long have you been selling real estate in Ohio?
10 years?
Are you familiar with Walnut Hills generally?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I've lived in East Walnut Hills since 1995 in multiple homes. 2 of them were in the historic district.
And are you familiar with the East Walnut Hills Historic District in particular?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Have you sold or helped clients buy or sell property in the historic district?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in your letter that we have submitted to the board, you concluded that this addition would have a 30 to 40% negative impact on One Beechcrest Lane's property value. Do you stand by that conclusion?
I do.
How did you arrive at that conclusion?
I arrive at that conclusion because that house, the whole south side is solarium, pool, patio between that. The whole south side is meant to be enjoyed, to enjoy the sun. The garage, the way it looked to me, it's going to block a lot of sunlight, definitely from the pool area, but also from that patio and from their kitchen, from their, I believe from their master bedroom and some of the other rooms, but mainly the solarium, the pool and that patio were meant for sun. I mean, that pool has been there since the house was built. The house was designed to enjoy the sun. And nobody likes a dark house. I can't sell a dark house.
So were those features a prominent selling point?
Oh, absolutely. I'm commenting on the sunlight. I mean, who doesn't want a solarium in a pool? And I think those things, sun is fundamental to them, the sunlight.
Do you have anything else that you'd like the board to know at this time?
I don't think so.
Those are all the questions we have for this witness.
Mr. Burke?
Ms. Wally, are you being paid for your testimony and opinion?
I'm not.
Are you an appraiser?
No.
And you've not done any study to justify your opinion of a 30 to 40% reduction in property values, have you?
Well, a lot of what we do, I sell a lot of homes and dark homes don't sell. They take a long time and they sell for a lot less.
You understand that if you were complying with the requirements of a registered appraiser in the state of Ohio, you would have to do a lot more than simply
Certainly,
express an
but I'm
opinion.
not an appraiser.
And your letter, that's a part of the record, indicates that your lovely view down Beechcrest will be completely blocked. You said that, didn't you?
Mhm.
That view's not completely blocked, is it?
The view, the cul-de-sac part would be blocked.
And what have you done to determine that? Have you gone down and stood at the fountain in the cul-de-sac and looked back at the property
I have
on whose
not.
behalf you are testifying?
No.
Have you stood on the property on whose behalf you are testifying and looked toward the fountain in the
Oh, absolutely,
cul-de-sac?
yes.
And you can see that from various places, including the table on which they sometimes eat dinner, can't you?
Yes.
And you could, even if the garage were constructed, couldn't you?
I don't believe you could.
You don't know that, do you?
No, because I can't see that without the building being there.
Have you seen what the property owners put up on their property to mark where the garage was going to be?
I have.
you saw the testimony from Dr. Tobler earlier today.
Yes.
And you know that the post that they put on the second floor of their house to show where they believed the garage was going to stick out to, that wasn't nearly accurate, was it?
I don't know that.
And you also state in your letter that there's no precedent for anything like this in the neighborhood. And you simply reject 6 Beechcrest Lane as not being in the neighborhood?
That's different to me. This blocks the side of the whole south side of their home, or at least the pool area and the patio area. I can't think of another situation in the neighborhood, and I've been there for.
You also indicate in your letter that there are few walls and fences to identify individual lots. Rather, the district flows from property to property. You quoted that, didn't you?
Mhm.
And one of the few walls that exists in the neighborhood is your client's wall. Well, it's not your client's, are they?
Well, that's because legally you have to have something around a pool. You have to have a structure around a pool.
The wall that stretches all along the,
That surrounds the pool.
can we pull up Tobler 8? There's a series of photos there.
What are you asking for?
Tobler 8. It's Exhibit 8, not page 8 of Exhibit 1. There you go. Is it your testimony that that's around the pool?
Oh, that's the fountain, yeah.
And the wall stretches to either side of that, doesn't it?
Yes, that's the high point, but it's very low.
It's very low. How tall do you think that is?
That in the center, because there's a fountain there, but it goes down from there. You can see that in that photo.
So these are not around the pool. These are not the walls to.
No, I forgot about that.
In Exhibit 9, same situation. And have you been there since Dr. Tobler put the reflector property to show
I have
where the
not.
corner of the garage would be? You have not?
I have not.
No other questions for her?
Do you have an additional witness?
We do not have any additional witnesses. I would like to make a closing statement at some point. I'm happy to do that now or whenever the board would feel is appropriate.
We'll reserve that for now. I think next in our order is public comment, and I do have a few people signed up, so we'll go through that. Before I do that though, does the board have any questions or comments before moving into public comment? Okay, I'm gonna go in order that people signed up. It looks like the first person might be Ms. Brown. I think she's already spoken. I'm sorry?
I think I accidentally said.
That's okay. Tiffany Shiver,
Yes.
would you like to come forward and add anything?
Sure, thank
We have a
you.
2-minute public comment period, so please try to adhere to that as closely as possible.
Okay.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Tiffany Shiver and I live at 3 Beach Crest Lane. I've already written substantive written objections, but I felt compelled to speak today after reviewing the Kohler submissions. I'm speaking today as one of the longest standing residents on Beach Crest Lane. I have a lot of experience with my property and the neighbors surrounding me seeking COAs and working with their neighbors to do that. In the past, neighbors seeking COAs have always shared their plans for review before submitting their application. This respectful approach has been such the standard practice, I thought it was the rule. And the Toblers themselves participated in this practice when our neighbors on Baker Place built their new construction garage. So it was shocking to me to find out the scope of this project after the hearing. The Toblers did send out an email in August, and I and most of my neighbors reasonably construed it as notice that construction was about to be starting on their property. Given how everybody else has behaved in the past and that they made no approach to consult anybody, we just assumed it was like being neighborly and saying, hey, we're going to have disruptions on the street. And so I was like, hey, good luck with that. It wasn't until I never got the board's notice from the city until like the day before the pre-hearing. And that was when other neighbors shared with me the extent of going on. I've just really been shocked and disappointed by how this whole process has gone on. We are a collaborative street, we're private, and so we have to take care of all of our services together, and that's quite a bit because we have this shared parkland. So we have an active email, we regularly get together and talk in person, and this was never brought to anybody before the application. I just think we have tried to engage with them politely, sharing our objections, and what I feel has been in response has not been kind of in the spirit of neighborly cooperation that we have known with our neighbors throughout. I think it's important to note that not one of my neighbors on Beach Crest Lane is here to support this application, despite them, from my knowledge, most if not all being asked to do so. I believe these standards exist for a reason, to maintain the integrity of this special neighborhood. You can't be recreated anywhere, and you can go have a large garage-centric home that eats up your property line and takes away kind of the intentional design of the whole street anywhere else in the city. I respect that they want to improve their house for their family. I went through the process when the previous family who owned that house built out the 3rd floor to accommodate their family with 4 children. I understand their needs. I think there could have been, some heads up and interchange with the neighbors that could have, led to a more, polite and decent agreement on this.
I'm giving a little bit of leeway. I know we've all been sitting here a long time, so I want to make sure everyone is heard, but if you could start to wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's really all. I mean, we have the standards on the street. I don't think anything they've presented and in the district, anything they've presented goes to support that they are complying with it. I mean, look at the scale of their house compared to the garage. Look at their property and how much this garage will eat up of their lot. It's not seen in East Walnut Hills.
Thank you. Next.
I do have a few questions for this witness who has just testified under oath.
Not a witness. I'm not a witness, I'm a public comment.
Was she sworn in?
She was sworn, yes, at the beginning of the hearing.
Well, I did because I didn't know. I'm happy to answer questions.
There's cross-examining public comment. I don't believe that's appropriate, and I don't think it calls for it anywhere in the rules.
This is part of a record that is being created. Her testimony under oath is now part of the record. What she's submitted presumably is part of the record. Don't I have the right to cross-examine?
I don't believe so. Mr. Burke, you do have the right to rebuttal. That will be the next step in this. I'm sorry, hold on. That's my mistake. You do have, it does call for cross-examination of members of the public. So each side will have an opportunity to do that. My apologies.
Is there an order in which we should receive cross-examination?
I guess we could start with the applicant. Yes.
And I'll keep this brief. Ms. Shriver, you sent a letter to the Toblers,
Mm-hmm,
and you also sent a letter to the board.
mm-hmm.
And in your letter to the Toblers, you indicated that you are someone with degrees in history, interior design, and law, correct?
I am.
And you understand with a degree in law that you need to be accurate in what you say, correct?
Yes.
And in your letter to the Toblers and your letter to the board, you suggested that this property was in a federal historic district?
I may have, it was in a historic district. I was not sure at the time. I believed it to be at the time in a federal historic district.
You know that it's not in a federal historic district.
Now I do, but at the time when I wrote the letter, I believed it to be in a federal historic district.
And your letter in both cases, particularly in the ones to the Toblers, you make the argument that they may comply with zoning, but they don't comply with federal standards, correct?
Well,
Didn't you make that argument?
yes,
And do you understand that if this were only in a federal district, as long as they weren't seeking a tax exemption or using federal dollars, they could do whatever the hell they wanted to do on the property?
no, what I've read and how I believe it is that the tax abatement laws are not required, but are the overriding standards that most historic districts use to guide how things are done in their districts.
That's very different than what you've said in these writings, isn't it?
I'm not here as a lawyer. I'm here as an interested party.
No other questions.
Mr. Burley, do you have any questions?
Ms. Shriver, did you receive a copy of the architectural plans in this case before the application was submitted?
No.
That's all I have for this witness.
Mr. Mike Hendy?
I just signed in.
He is our builder.
Okay.
He's here if we need him.
Okay. Ms. Maria Wally?
Oh, that was me.
Oh, okay, sorry, losing track of names. Toblers, Stephen Ginter, Tim Burke, Mr. Jacobs,
Yes,
would you like to add anything?
sure.
I believe you may still need to be sworn in.
Okay,
Were you sworn earlier?
no,
Okay. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes.
What would you like to tell us?
Well, I guess what I'd like to say is give a perspective on sort of from a point of view of a homeowner on the street and not necessarily an expert in architecture. And so I think we've had a lot of people going through the details of setbacks and heights and so forth. But I do think it's important when you look at those things and as you go through that kind of information to differentiate between proximity and prominence. So while the additional garage at number 3 is closer to the sidewalk, it is in no way as prominent as this extension would be. It's kind of hidden behind trees. You don't really even kind of notice it. It's not attached to the main house. It's separate. So I don't think in any way this is a comparable sort of garage addition. Second, in addition with number 6, this is a massive house. The garage is probably, again, you might be pretty obvious from the street, but one reason for that is this house was the original house in this entire area, and there's a wall in front of the house, and the only gap in that wall is a view to the front door, but then there's also one over there in the driveway. But just having lived in this neighborhood, I guess I'm now the longest standing resident on the street. We bought the house in 2009. I'm between number 6 and number 3. It never struck me that this is a big garage. It is a small, it's a low garage. The house is more impressive. So there's no way that this thing in any way competes with the facade of the house or the stature of the house. And so I think just in conclusion, what I'd like to say is, I think that I certainly appreciate your desire to have a 3-car garage, be able to park all your cars, out of the elements. As a car guy, I really appreciate that. But I think that no matter what you do, there's gonna have to be a compromise somewhere. And it seems to me by pushing the one proposal that's in front of you, that rather than making the compromises within the confines of your own property, and there's been some plans suggested that would allow for that parking, maybe not with the additional, rooms and second laundry room and so forth, that would essentially, where the compromises would be within the bounds of your own property as opposed to imposing them on the people to the north of you. Because that southern view, I've been there, the southern view, not just the view, but the sunlight that comes in there and the fact that the breeze in the summer comes up from that direction, that would be blocked by this structure to a large degree. And I think that it's probably better that we find a way to get a compromise that makes maybe not everybody as happy as they'd like to be, but would be a better optimum across the group.
Mr. Burke, did you have any cross-examination for
I don't have any questions for you.
Mr. Burley?
Did you receive a copy of the architectural plans in this case before the application was submitted?
No.
That's all I have for this witness.
I believe that is all I have signed up for public comment. Did I miss any? Okay, it is now time for rebuttal by Mr. Burke.
I'll keep the rebuttal very brief. I do want to ask Dr. Tobler just a few questions. If we can go back to his Exhibit 1, please. Take that back.
I'll pull it up.
Page 6 of Exhibit 1.
That's so funny.
This is the appropriate slide.
No, it's page 6.
It's this.
Yep.
No, it's keep
No.
going down. It's towards the end.
Says 6.
That's Exhibit 6. I'm talking about page 6 of
Oh,
Exhibit.
okay,
1.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I tried.
It should be, I'll tell you what. Right there. Keep going. That's your.
Oops.
Right there, right there, right there, right there.
That's it. Dr. Tobler, can you explain this slide one more time, please?
So the red marker is measured in all directions based on measurements given to me by Steve Ginter of the northeast corner of the garage structure. The yellow is a marker or identification on the property of Beechcrest 1 to identify the wherever, the front edge of the garage. The red marker is at 31 feet, 1.5 inches, and that yellow is at 39 feet, 7 inches. Our original proposal was about 34 feet. So even with the original proposal, before we pushed it back, it still is about 5 feet off when you translocate it to our property line.
And how long did that inaccurate depiction of where the front of the garage stay there?
It was moved back 5 days ago. It's been there since the beginning of October, middle of October.
And can you explain to the board when it was that you communicated with your neighbors that you were going to do a project?
When we were advised to, we sent an email out in August that we were trying to be as forthright and open with our neighbors as possible. Let them know we're doing a home I believe the language in the email said partial home renovation. That includes the creation of a new garage, and to reach out if we have any questions. And that we are here to discuss anything with them. So we felt like we had communicated exactly what we needed to.
And you knew, of course, that if anyone came to you to talk about this, you would have to show them the plans.
We were going to be as open as possible. I mean, I'm kind of an introverted person. Like to send like plans of my whole home is a little uncomfortable, honestly. So I was happy to share it. And the second someone did ask, we did send the everything they asked for. We were completely open. So that was not an issue. I mean, I didn't know of any standard. No one ever informed me that there's a standard to share your entire plans whenever you design it. When we sent that email out, we didn't have a hearing date yet. And so we actually weren't even sure when we were going to do this project when we embarked on doing a home renovation. We weren't even sure if we were going to do it at all. We weren't sure what the possibilities were. In fact, our original timeline was to start in about 5 years. And we started this process 1.5 years ago, and things have just, evolved and changed over time. So when we finally realized we were going to move forward with it, that's when we started to communicate.
I have no other questions for Dr. Tobler.
Do you have anything further on rebuttal?
Not.
Dr. Tobler, how long have you been planning the project?
We initially started talking to different contractors about 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, and we weren't even sure when we were going to do it, what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. And so we were just trying to gather information. We weren't sure financially what we were going to do. So there was just a lot of factors that went into it. And so really towards, the end of July and August is when we decided to really kind of move forward with it and submit the application and go. So that's when we communicated to everybody.
By communication, just to be clear, you didn't send out the architectural plans.
No, we sent out
Just a simple question. You did not send out the architectural plans to any of your neighbors before applying. And Ms. Brown and Mr. Blackshaw actually reached out to you once they received the plans. They asked to meet with you, didn't they?
They first told us to cancel the hearing and that we were bad neighbors for not involving them to begin with.
And you said you would be willing to meet with them, but changing the footprint was off the table and changing the height was off.
Honestly, when they started changing the rhetoric of how the emails exchange were going, we started to back off. So we tried to be very open, as you can see in all of the emails that we had back and forth. But when they started to be aggressive and tell us to cancel the hearing, we started to shut down a little bit, honestly.
No further questions for this witness.
By the way, you heard your neighbor testify about the potential of adding trees along the property line. What was your understanding of what that was all about?
The original email that Erica sent us was said, hey, we'd like to collaborate in putting privacy trees because we just have stone and they can't build and they need our property to put trees on. And we said we'd be happy to do that. In fact, we had our landscaper design a whole kind of, we don't have those. We asked him to design something to work together so that we could plant things on our property, whatever they were looking for. So we were trying to collaborate as well.
Okay, so I think did you have anything in response to that? I think we're ready for closings. It will be Mr. Burley first, and then Mr. Burke will have the last opportunity to address us.
Honorable members of the board, I sincerely appreciate your time and attention. I realize this is late in the evening, but I hope you can see from the testimony of everyone this evening that this is an important matter that will affect everyone on Beechcrest Lane. And there's been lots of discussion this evening about what was or was not said, when, what may or may not have been shared. Frankly, we're not here to debate that. We're not here to go tit for tat about emails or text messages. There's only one fact that matters to illustrate the lack of communication here. You've heard it time and time again. At no point did the applicants actually share specifically what they wanted to do with their neighbors before applying to this board. And as you're well aware, that is a recipe for miscommunication and a lack of meaningful conversation when someone is already pursuing a decision from this board before anyone has a chance to even understand what's going on, what's being proposed, and how this will affect their property. And so the result here really is not surprising. There's no support for this application from any of the neighbors on Beechcrest Lane. You heard from our clients who live at 1 Beechcrest Lane. You heard from the folks immediately to the south at 3 Beechcrest Lane. You heard from the owner at 5 Beechcrest Lane. All of them believe that this simply does not comply with the guidelines. Alternatives could be considered. In fact, they were considered. That's not in dispute either. Our architects submitted numerous designs that attempted to meet the programmatic, I hesitate to say needs, the programmatic desires of the Toblers in this instance. The urban conservator himself submitted a proposed design. And the applicant's architect, Mr. Ginter, admitted openly that alternatives exist, alternatives that would better comply with the guidelines for this district. So what you have here, unfortunately, when an applicant insists on moving forward without consulting his neighbors, is a somewhat predictable result. You have the least possible compliant design. And so what's driving this? You heard from the architect, it's the goals of the property owner. And I don't think they're unreasonable goals. That's not what we're here to debate. The fact that they have a growing family is something that's a blessing, and that's something that probably many people in this room have experienced. But their goals, their programmatic wants, are what's driving this, not respect for the guidelines. Their goals, as you heard from the architect, are 3 cars to be stored in a plus-size garage, a very generous keeping space, and it has to be attached. The urban conservator himself summed this up very succinctly. He used a word that I think describes this aptly: convenience. This design is driven by convenience. If convenience was the measure for this board's decisions, you wouldn't have guidelines at all. You are not here to determine whether the applicant has an admirable goal that they're looking to achieve. You're not even looking at whether you personally like the design. You are looking at whether the design, as demonstrated by credible evidence, substantially conforms to the applicable conservation guidelines. And I would respectfully submit to you that in this instance, they do not. You just have to look at the numbers. You heard from Mr. Colbley, based on their inventory of this district, that the predominant form for garages and carriage houses is detached, located to the rear, in terms of height and siding and massing, all subservient to the principal structure. That's not what you have here. You have a garage that is functionally an extension of the principal structure. It is viewed that way from the street. And it literally competes with the principal structure in this instance. Mr. Burke, not like our term, the main elevation width. The urban conservator described the main house block. That's what we're talking about, the front facade on either side of the main door in this instance. The width of the garage is 73% of that facade. What it says from the street is the garage is equal to the main house. That's what it's saying. It's transforming this historically a district where garages have always taken a respectful backseat. That's straight from the guidelines themselves. And it says this is now a garage-centric neighborhood. 73% of the main house block is 75% of the main house height. And importantly, let's talk about footprint. You heard from Mr. Colbley that the garages and carriage houses in this district are usually 10 to 20% of the footprint of the main house. This addition is 63% of the footprint of the main house. It's massive. There is no precedent for it anywhere in the district. And we believe that we have given you credible evidence to support that conclusion. And the guidelines also talk about compatibility with adjacent structures. What could be less compatible than an addition that would likely cause a 30 to 40% reduction in property value? That is something that this board can and must consider in determining compliance with the guidelines in this case. So again, if convenience was the measure, you wouldn't have guidelines at all. You have to look at what is actually being proposed. And by any account, this is possibly the least compliant design that could be proposed. We're not opposed to a garage in all forms. We heard that time and time again. Ms. Brown and Mr. Blackshaw would welcome the opportunity to talk with the Toblers about something that could be acceptable to their family and more closely complies with the guidelines in this case. Unfortunately, that conversation could not happen in a meaningful way. And the only way that it can at this point is if the board denies the COA as presented. And for all the reasons that I've already said, and as stated in my letter, we believe it is your duty to do so. So that is what we ask you to do. And I thank you again for your time and attention.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you.
Closing?
And I do appreciate the amount of time you all have been here. The Toblers have done everything that they were legally required to do. They did reach out to their neighbors early on in this process. Neighbors today are saying, well, they didn't come back to us early enough with any plans. They didn't have to, but they did open themselves up to discussing those plans and essentially invited people to talk to them about it. And what we're dealing with are the conservation guidelines for the East Walnut Hills Historic District. And I've had other experience with them and other experience, as you know, with historic districts. And the East Walnut Hills guidelines start out like many of the others do and make the point that the guidelines are just that. They are guidelines. They are not ordinances. They are not unchangeable. And the guidelines themselves say the conservation guidelines outlined in this booklet are intended to assist property owners, architects, and contractors. The guidelines are not rigid sets of rules, but serve as a guide in making improvements which are compatible with the district's character. They set broad parameters within which district changes should occur while maintaining ample opportunity for design creativity and individual choice. The Toblers selected an architect with significant experience in historic districts, even in this particular district, on this particular street. And the response has largely been today a series of exaggerations. And they begin with the statements by Mr. Colby, and I've worked on both sides of Mr. Colby previously. But when you put in writing, there are no examples of anything remotely like this. And the fact is, if you've walked just Beechcrest Lane, that's just not true. And 6 Beechcrest, with that monstrous 3-car garage there that is closer to the street than I think perhaps any other garage on the street is, with the possible exception of the 3-car garage at 10 Beechcrest Lane, right across the street from 1 Beechcrest Lane, which is almost at the street as well, but is older. The one at 6 Beechcrest Lane was built under the East Walnut Hills guidelines. And you approved it. And there are other examples that we've talked about, both that existed at the time the district was created, with 1834 Keys Crescent, 1875 Keys Crescent, and probably 10 Beechcrest. But there are other examples of 3-car garages that have been approved by this board that have established precedents and have made changes, not all 3-car garages, but 3 Beechcrest Lane, clearly approved by this board, and puts a garage essentially in front of 2 Beechcrest. 6 Beechcrest Lane is clearly an example very similar to what the Toblers proposed to do. And in the documents that we have provided to you, we've given you the staff report on Tobler Exhibit 2, 3 Beechcrest Lane, and the staff report on 2766 Baker Place, which is the back line of the Toblers property, where the Toblers worked with that property owner in doing a garage right on their rear property line. We provided you with Tobler Exhibit 4, which is the staff report on 1831 Keys Crescent. And if you're familiar with the district, you're familiar with Keys Crescent, it is very similar in terms of the size of houses to Beechcrest. And Beth Johnson was the urban conservator on the Keys Crescent project that recommended approval. And here's what Beth said. Most of the houses along Keys Crescent and this part of East Walnut Hills have either a detached or attached garage. Many of these garages are larger than a normal accessory structure as well. These houses are grand, large houses with a large lot development. Larger accessory structures fit into the landscaping and parcels without creating an overbuilt environment. That was approved by this board under these same guidelines that you are dealing with tonight. We believe that their proposal should be approved. And look, just within the last 2 years, I've been in front of you, maybe it's 3 years now, because it was during the COVID isolation. On the opposite side of Mr. Colby, with the project at the corner of Sycamore and Auburn, where a 2-story addition and a 3-car garage being built flat up against Auburn Avenue, where there are no other 3-car garages flat up against Auburn Avenue. That project required variances. You granted them. And that project was approved. There was some minor modification that protected a bit of a view out of a side window on my client's house that allowed her to see the Auburn Park directly across the street, a little bit of it. This project, they will still see substantial portions down the street. They want to say, no, we won't, but that's just not true. If you've been up there and looked at the property, there is ample views left preserved, largely across the Tobler's front yard. And earlier this year, on Wold, you approved a proposal to add an addition to the north elevation to the house, a garage with a living space above it, attached to the main house by an enclosed breezeway. I didn't represent the client in front of this board. I represented the client defending your decision in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's also in the East Walnut Hills Historic District, approved under these guidelines. The project proposed by the Toblers is a sound project. It should be approved, and I hope the board will approve it. I do, again, say thank you for the very long meeting that you have conducted this afternoon and this evening. Thank you.
Questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I'm a historian group, so I do not have the architect's eye, but when I looked at that, the addition to me took over the main part of the house. I just saw it as being too big, and that's the first thing you see. You don't see the main house anymore. So I would not approve.
Question for the owners. How old's that roof on your house? How old is the roof?
The roofing, I'm not sure. I mean, it was preceded us.
I couldn't tell without getting on your property and for fear of being shot, but it looks like it's folded asphalt shingles.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's under it's cedar, so I don't know if there was cedar at some point. But there is cedar plank underneath the eaves.
And the plans presented show a dependency on matching that material. I was curious what Plan B was if you couldn't find it to match the asphalt shingles, because
I guess we'd have to redo the whole roofing.
you would be willing to do that?
If we had to.
That's not the basis of my decision. Personally, I feel that addition's inappropriate. I think there's options there that would allow it to be, you may have to change your program somewhat. I think you could still get a 3-car garage on there and have it not compete with the main facade of the house. So I would be willing to provide a motion that said we could table this, and you could come back with an appropriate solution. My sense is, and the board has no problem telling me when I'm wrong, my sense is the board's not going to approve this as is. because of the dominance of this addition. And I don't know that preserving the view shed is necessarily the clincher here. As much as I can appreciate you not wanting to lose it, I don't know that zoning laws necessarily in Ohio protect view sheds. And it's definitely not a significant part of COA approval. It can be part of it, but it's not significant. The composition of the house, however, is, in my opinion, if you can find a way to push that thing back, I think I'd be more than happy to take another look at it. I mean, it's a fantastic neighborhood. Everybody agrees with the same thing. It's one of Cincinnati's treasures. And your attorney's arguments over the other garages that are out. But if you walk the neighborhood long enough, what's unique to me about this neighborhood is the way it just kind of meanders. The properties all kind of visually interconnect, which is very unusual, especially in a neighborhood of this quality. And I think you would lose that by substantially changing what that property looks like there. So
I have great sympathy with your desire to make your house more livable for your needs and everything. I would like to think that there is a solution to that desire that would be a little more acceptable than this. It seems like there's this spectrum, and you're over here. And I think probably there's a way to ameliorate some of your difficulties without doing this. Seems it's just a little more.
I also struggle with the height, with the equal kind of setback as the main house. And honestly, I struggle a little bit with the proportion of wall to opening as well. It is pretty vastly different than the main house. So I am in a similar boat that I don't think that I can support this as it is currently designed. So I think that leads us to the question, would you like us to consider a continuance or a tabling, or would you like us to do an up-down vote?
Can we have just a minute?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you,
That has everything.
Yeah. Bring it back.
Can we request that this be put off for a month? To provide and I don't know whether you've got a second meeting in December
or not? If you do, okay.
Yeah, we can make a motion to continue this I always get continuing and tabling confused on continuance.
Before I make the motion, I just also want to echo the comments of my other commission members, prominence of the addition and just really kind of, I understand the need for the size. It's just having it at that front envelope kind of also adds to the overall impression of the garage, overwhelming the existing building. So potentially bringing that back, kind of figuring out how to make the space organized more efficiently. I'm also kind of curious about the existing garage doesn't seem to be very well programmed right now, so maybe there's an opportunity there. But that being said, I will make a motion to continue this
December 16th.
to the December 16th meeting of the Historic Conservation Board. I'll make a motion to continue this item to the December 16th ACB meeting.
Second.
Mr. Zalesko?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins?
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Do you have any additional questions or?
If you've got a question.
I do have a question. So would you favor us knocking down the original garage over preserving it?
On face value, that wouldn't be a killer for me. I can't speak to the other.
And then how much further back, like what would be a minimum pushback that would make this?
I think your best bet is going to be to update your renderings because it's gonna just be about how it's perceived. It's hard to know exactly what that distance is gonna be. But I think that the relationship to kind of that connector piece is gonna be really important in what that looks like.
Thanks.
I do believe we have one other item of business.
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments on staff level? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the October 2024 staff approvals as laid out by staff.
Mr. Zalesko?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins?
Aye.
Young?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. I believe that is it, which would just leave a motion regarding adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for your time.
To keep this stuff?